I know we're getting a little bit of late start here, so we like to be on time. We got a lot of information to cover. I would like to call to order the Pasco County Board of County Commissioners fiscal year 2025 budget workshop today, June 11th, 2024. At this time, please silence all electronic devices and microphones, and please rise for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
O merciful Creator, your hand is open wide to satisfy the needs of every living creature. Make us thankful for your loving providence, and grant that we, remembering the account that we must one day give, may be faithful stewards of your good gifts. Amen.
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 I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
District 2, Commissioner Waitman.
Present.
District 3, Commissioner Starkey.
Here.
District 4, Commissioner Yeager.
Here.
District 5, Commissioner Mariano. District 1, Chairman Oakley.
Here. Let it show that we have a quorum present. And at this time, I'd like to thank all the staff for all the work they went through to bring this to us, this budget hearing today, because it's a lot of work. And I was just thinking about it early this morning that the fact of it is, when I got elected about 7.5 years ago now, the fact that we were just starting budgets in June, and look at where we are today with this budget. So we have been prepared very well by Mr. Kabbalah and his team, and we got to be grateful and thankful for that. So it helps us make the right decisions, and we have time to do it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Kabbalah and go from there.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll echo that sentiment. This represents probably 6 to 7 months of hard work by not only our budget team, but our various departments, department heads, managers, supervisors that pull this together. The budget team has heard what the board has asked for in the past, and I think over the past 6 months we've had an unprecedented level of transparency and engagement with the board, starting in January with our initial workshop to understand some of the board's priorities at that time, start our strategic planning process, into February with revenue projections, and into March looking at the state of the general fund. And then April, bringing forward and working collaboratively with the constitutional officers and involving them in the budget process as well, and landing here in June. Normally we do this workshop in May, but we pushed it to June so we would have good numbers from the property appraiser, and we could walk in and talk to the board realistically about where we sit here. And so I'm going to turn it over to our Office of Management and Budget Director, Amy Lee Farrell, who will guide us through a presentation. This is obviously, we want engagement and interaction throughout the process. This is the opportunity to kind of let us know if we've stuck the landing, or there's some things that we need to continue to look at. There's still a long road ahead as far as the budget process goes, but we are moving into having to set and adopt the trim in July. So the closer we get to the mark, the better we're going to be. So, Ms. Farrell?
Hi, good morning. Amy Farrell, Budget Director with Office of Management and Budget. So today, here's our agenda, 50,000-foot view of what we're going to be talking about. So we are going to go over very briefly what the board's strategic goals and priorities were that we outlined in January, like Mike was talking about. We're going to touch on the Save Our Homes legislation. We're going to have an educational presentation from the property appraiser. We're very excited for this collaborative effort to come in and just give some education on how to read your trim notice and all of those things that sometimes can be a bit cumbersome and confusing. We're going to go through the budget assumptions that are the foundation of all the numbers we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about taxable assessed values, our new MSTUs that we're looking to push forward with. We'll talk about the board's budget, the budget submitted by our constitutional officers that we have to date. We'll look at our capital improvement plan, and then a reminder of what's still to come in this very lengthy budget process. All right, so back in January, we met and we discussed priorities and goals. The board let us know that their priorities are still with small business incentives and making sure that we're finding ways to streamline those processes. Pedestrian safety is very important. Maintaining our reserve limits, so as a reminder, those are 60 days of our operating to be maintained in a restricted reserve just in case. And then our two new municipal service taxing units. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Save Our Homes Amendment to the Constitution. This has been in effect since 1995. So my team has put together a couple slides after this one to try to demonstrate what that means from a monetary standpoint, just to illustrate how this has positively impacted our long-term homeowners. So as you're aware, the Save Our Homes provision, it will cap your taxable assessed value at either 3% or CPI, whichever is less. And for many, many years, CPI had been less than 3%, but since 2022, and again, we'll show you this graphic, but since 2022, CPI has actually been over the 3%. So we'll be demonstrating what that means to those homesteaded property owners. And then if you're a non-homesteaded property owner, you're capped at a 10% growth in taxable assessed value. So in these examples, we've got, for ease of math, we're showing $100,000 of taxable assessed value, and then anyone can scale that based off your taxable assessed value. So for easy math, $100,000 taxable assessed value with a 3% cap, you'll see that overall your property taxes would increase by roughly $51. Now, if you're not homesteaded, that number looks like $253, and that's maintaining the millage rates that were adopted at the end of last fiscal year for fiscal year 24. So what does all that mean, Amy, is probably what you're asking yourself. Well, this it's green. This green line chart is going to show you what the percentage increase applied to your taxable assessed values have been since 2015. Now you'll notice that big red spike in 22, that's when CPI was above that 3%. And it was above 3% again in 23, and it's above 3% again here in 24. But that green line, if you're homesteaded, your taxable assessed value has been capped at that growth. So that difference is, we'll call that savings. And so we've run the numbers off a $100,000 taxable assessed value home starting 2015, and you'll see how that grew each year nominally on the left side in terms of taxable assessed value. And then that difference between the red, which again is what it would have been if you weren't homesteaded, versus what it is green line if you are homesteaded, and that's about $160 of savings per every 100,000 taxable assessed value, right? So this is what this legislation has done in terms of savings for our homeowners. All right, so before we kick it off to the property appraiser's office, was there anything about Save Our Homes, Mike, you wanted to discuss?
No, I think we're good.
All right.
It is a nice picture.
It's phenomenal picture.
He's so real. Good morning, good morning, board. My name is Brendan Fitter. I'm the Chief Deputy of Administration at the Property Appraiser Mike Wells. I'm joined by my colleague Daniel Villa.
We make you work.
Are we back?
You have to continuously hold it. Such a pain. I
I think we're good. Are we on?
You have to press it down the whole time you're talking.
Brendan.
No,
That won't be yet. Here, we have an extra seat that's right here. That works.
Let's try this one again. No?
Here.
Brendan, you have to hold the button down when you're talking.
Understood, Commissioner. There's a switch on the bottom too. That's what
Oh.
we're trying to get live. Okay. We are. We'll do it this way. Okay.
All right.
We'll start over again. Good morning, Commissioners. Brendan Fitter, Chief Deputy of Administration for Property Appraiser Mike Wells. And I'm joined by my colleague Daniel Villa, Chief Deputy of Valuation. Mr. Wells extends his apologies. He couldn't be here today due to a family medical emergency, but he has certainly advocated for this opportunity to come before all of you and share a little bit about our processes and how we arrive at our numbers. This is
Since this is a budget workshop, I'd be remiss if we didn't take a brief moment to touch on our own annual submission to the Florida Department of Revenue that this board and, of course, County Administration and OMB received a copy of. Overall, we came in at a conservative 5.9% despite our growth. That includes plans for one additional commercial appraiser position, pay increases for our team, keeping pace with FRS mandates, and, of course, electronic data processing and security and technology needs. We're proud to share that your Pasco County Property Appraiser's Office is among the most efficient in the state. Our budget office per capita is only $12.12. For reference, that's the third lowest in the state's 67 counties. Statewide average falls at just a few cents under $20 per capita for property appraisers. Our budget per parcel is just $21.30. That's the fifth lowest in the state of Florida. And our parcels per position comes in at 5,104. That's more than 5,000 parcels per team member, the fifth highest in the state. When we talk about when we talk about assessment data for Pasco County, growth is, of course, one of the first words that comes to mind. We're presently assessing more than 316,000 real property parcels. You can see how that breaks down on the left there, with single-family homes, of course, leading the way. But as you all know, we've seen significant growth in multifamily value in recent years through Class A apartment complexes and, of course, commercial investment in our community. The graph charts a familiar tale representing just assessed and taxable values from 2020 through 2023. You can see that market value growth has made a staggering climb from 46 to 81 billion in just 4 years. Florida's marketplace has been hot, and the Pasco MSA and Tampa MSA, were no exception. Our current preliminary just or market value for 2024 is now 91,855 million. So that's literally double where we were in 2020. So how does that translate into preliminary taxable value estimates for 2024? Well, for this board and for county operating, we're presently tracking at a 12.8% increase year over year. Municipalities continue to see exceptional growth, with Dade City on track for a 20+% increase, Zephyr Hills coming in at 15%, and Newport Richey is now topping $1 billion in taxable value for the first time. So what are the values you see annually as customers on your trim or in this board? You've heard the terms just, assessed, and taxable mentioned in the graph earlier, and it's a good opportunity to share what each of them means for our citizens, as they can sometimes be confusing, and frankly, for anyone who's not dealing with these items frequently. Just value is the market value established January 1 by the Property Appraiser's Office, and it's important to note this date because January 1 is also our statutory assessment date around which the annual roll cycles. Just value is the value that this office assigns based on market transactions and mass appraisal data. It is not the list or sale price of a home, nor does it mirror that of a private or fee appraisal in preparation to list a home. Assessed value is going to be your just value minus the assessment limitations that Amy just spoke about, like your 3% cap for homestead or 10% non-homestead cap. And as you know, that cap or difference accrues over time and is a powerful tool for tax savings, and it additionally benefits homeowners in the form of portability, where they can port up to $500,000 of cap up to 3 tax years after they vacate the homestead within Florida's 67 counties.
Brendan, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can you explain just value again?
Sure. Just value is the market value established January 1 for that year by the Property Appraiser's Office.
I can read that, but if a house sells for a certain price, why doesn't that become the market value?
Sure. So Florida's level of assessment is 100% less reasonable cost of sale. So that number, historically, at times, it's come in at, let's say, 85%. In recent years, we've seen more like 90%. Sometimes we could also see 95. We could also see 102% in some instances. It really depends upon the larger market conditions and the mass appraisal data for hundreds of sales as a whole in like and common classes, rather than an individual transaction. And we're going to touch on that, Commissioner, a few slides up in the 3 approaches to value, the difference we see in the disparity sometimes between, say, a single-family home transaction that's based more on sales price and that data versus a commercial transaction, which is based more on net operating income and what the business might earn in that scenario.
Okay.
Okay.
I got some parcels I might pull out for you to.
Okay.
You know how I like to do that.
We'll bring Daniel up for those. And then, of course, taxable value, the last one on this list, is the assessed value minus exemptions. That is your homestead, widow, widowers, et cetera. So that $50,000 or $5,000 reduction for individual exemptions. So here we see the question that we field thousands of calls on annually, especially during trim season. I have the same house as my neighbor, so why are my taxes different? Sometimes, in extreme examples, it even occurs within a duplex of identical floor plans, a dividing wall between the same roof and similar qualities and everything else. Well, ultimately, it comes down to the owner and their qualifiers and not the dwellings. This slide is probably the most important concept to share with our customers. In Florida, value resets to market at time of sale or change of ownership. We say this all the time, over and over, a prior owner's taxes will not be an indicator of the new owner's tax bill. We really can't stress this enough. Every year, we receive calls that begin with, I got ready to buy my home, I looked up the taxes before I bought this house, and they were $1,700. Yeah. Now, they're $5,000, and you've raised them 300%. And then sometimes there's an additional layer where someone has conflated a homestead 3% cap, and that's the only amount that they could have gone up. But again, we go back to that reset at time of sale. So we always ask our customers and everyone, please never base your calculations on a prior owner's taxes. Every single parcel on our website is equipped with the tax estimator feature at the top of the page. And if you go on there, we encourage you to plug in always the full sale price and then click your applicable exemptions, and you'll get an accurate estimate. We very much, we hate to take the call from folks who budgeted carefully for a home, especially in this market. They qualified on a number, and they were not given the correct information along the way by those that they worked with, and they now have an escrow shortfall of potentially thousands of dollars to clean up in that first year.
Brendan, may I ask another question?
Yes.
Because I listened to the Pinellas County Constitutional's budget meeting, and in there, the property appraiser mentioned that you either have a 3% or a 10%.
Correct.
And so there may be times when you want to stick with the 10 and
Right.
not go the
So
other route.
application for homestead is considered a status change,
Right.
and that can also reset your value or cap, as you said, Commissioner. So there are situations where someone, let's say that they've been in a home for 10 or 15 years, never applied for homestead. They may have accrued a six-figure cap at that point, that they would be vacating to go back to a $50,000 cap for homestead and to carry the 3% moving forward. So that's a decision that we help folks make when they call the office with a scenario like that. Especially, really, it depends on their future time and tenure in the home. Do they anticipate they're going to stay there for another 10 or 15 years? Is it a lifetime home? Do they plan to move in 2 or 3? That's how we help guide customers on that.
But and anywhere in your presentation, do you talk about the 10% cap?
The 10% cap is for non-homestead for
Right, but it's not
commercial.
set, you don't have that here, bullet here.
No,
Unless it's on the
not
next
at,
page.
not at this point in the slide. We will mention it a little
Okay.
further down.
Right.
Okay. Move ahead, please.
I didn't know that.
Thank you. Right, so we've touched on this a little already with some of the questions from Commissioner Starkey about individual sales versus mass appraisal. And mass appraisal is what we deal in. And the distinct difference in this really is that it's very different than private or fee appraisal, which you might seek out when you begin to list or buy a home. It values large groups of sale, meaning hundreds of them at a time. We use rules and methodologies established by the Florida Department of Revenue, and we value groups using common data, standardized methods, and statistical testing and market analysis. So we touched already on Florida's level assessment is 100% less reasonable cost of sale. So we're going to come in at a percentage at or below that recorded sale price. Another important item to touch on here, and when we talked about looking at individual sales and things, is what mass appraisal and the Department of Revenue prohibit us from doing in the assessment process. And we're all aware of the deliberate separation of powers between taxing authorities and the assessor. And there is that natural curiosity, of course, when you see a commercial sale, say on frontage, 54, 56, 19, and you might see a sale price and then notice some disparity in our value or a difference. Really, in simplest terms, mass appraisal brings those equity and uniformity into the values through that process. We touch every parcel annually through the appraisal process, through CAMA and mass appraisal. Even though we do rechecks on a 5-year cycle, every parcel is being touched via mass appraisal. And the Florida Department of Revenue conducts annual comprehensive reviews of our values. And I say that with a cautionary piece that looking at individual ones, which is what's called selective reappraisal or sales chasing, is strictly prohibited. It goes back to our earlier point that we're valuing like groups and common data and many marketplace transactions at once to preserve the uniformity for the taxpayers. And while we're always happy to look, of course, at a value or things like that, when we get into potential larger disparity or a larger adjustment, that is always best left to the Value Adjustment Board. We confer, I can't speak for them, with the other counties, of course, regularly on these matters, and they follow the same process, leaving that to that impartial board. Okay, so we touched on this before, Commissioner, the three approaches to value. So it says it at the top of the slide here, we do not create value, transactions in the marketplace do. So we'll start with the first, and this is your most common for single-family home sales anyway, the sales comparison approach. We go back to that January 1 assessment date. We are analyzing sales that are similar in nature, properties and parcels similar in nature, and sales, of course, that are arm's-length transactions, where the buyer and seller both acted without undue pressure. This approach is given, as I said, considerable weight when we're valuing residential properties. The cost approach, you see it defined here. What does it cost to replace that structure today using labor and materials in today's marketplace? Do we need to depreciate that structure? And then we add that resulting value to the land. And the last is the income approach. And this is when we touch on those commercial parcels and frontage where you may see that difference between the sale price and how we have it valued. This is when we have to use market rental rates, vacancy and collection loss allowances, and operating expenses. And what we're doing here is creating net operating income, and then we're going to capitalize that to estimate value. You hear the term cap rates sometimes, or capitalization rates with commercial properties. That's where we're deriving that value. Sometimes, in some scenarios, depending on the amount of data we have from each, an appraiser may reconcile or blend two of the value indications using multiple approaches to create this. And we've touched on it. We use a computer-assisted mass appraisal, or CAMA system, and that's the software that allows us to analyze many sales at once across common groups. All right, so everyone here is familiar with our existing trim notice. This is what it looked like before. We see lots of 8-point fonts and things crammed in corners with lots of abbreviations, and it really wasn't the clearest format we felt for the customer. So we wanted to move forward with a redesign that would better facilitate public education and understanding of how the assessment ultimately converts to property taxes, a clearer picture of who's levying what, links to our online presences, and I'll be candid, we were running out of space, so that's the other reason that we're moving in a different direction. So this is the new trim format. This is what this is going to look like. A little easier on the eyes, not so busy. We start up top with your value information from our office, and you're going to see your three values, again we mentioned, your just value, your assessed value, and your taxable value, spread across the columns for easier explanation for our customers. Then we're going to move down to the taxing authority information. We've done groupings this time so that it's clear who the levying authority is, and more so, we are carrying that taxable value down in the first column next to the taxing authority, which allows us a multiplier to carry across. It's a lot easier to explain to a customer when they can bring that value across right against the corresponding millage next to it and do that calculation sort of in real time, seeing prior year's taxes, current, and proposed. The blue bar at the bottom is your total of your ad valorem and non-ad valorem assessments. And we're doing the non-ad valorems on the reverse side broken out now, so there's more space and clearer explanations. When we move to the bottom here, you again see your assessment reductions. We talked about your homestead cap, your 10% cap, how those apply to your assessment reduction, your exemptions you qualify for, of course, and we have added QR codes, which will take customers directly to their parcel page on our website, and the statutory required value adjustment board information as well. And then on the back page, instead of those crammed abbreviations on the front, we've now gone to our public hearing information. We've received calls in the past, of course, about I didn't see that or I hadn't known. So this should lay it out a lot more clearly for the customers, dates, times, locations, where they can engage in the process with all of you. And then, of course, the CDDs below. We all know that they've become a substantial part of many tax bills within this county, and we wanted to provide more room to lay those out clearly for everyone. And that's really it for our overview. We're happy to take any questions that the board
Chair.
may have.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Brendan, I very much appreciate the reformatting of the trim notice here. I think it's fantastic. More transparency and easier understanding, so good work to you all and your team. I think this will go hopefully a long way this cycle, and folks can answer their questions, and we can help them walk them through their questions, you know, if they share this with us as they call our offices. So great work there.
I have a, thank you. I have a question on how you value boat and RV storage properties. I've been, I see them on here as a vacant commercial. But I know that, you know, they're getting $200, pretty much a car or a boat or trailer, whatever. So how did you say you value commercial property?
Via the income approach, Commissioner, I'm going to let Daniel speak to that. He's been doing valuation for us for 20 years, especially since it's specific to that class of property.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Daniel Villa. I'm the Chief Deputy of Valuation. I've been with the office for 21 years. So your question specifically talks about boats,
The
storage?
boat and RV storage, because I've been looking at sites around the county, and they're all under a classification called vacant commercial. When they're not vacant, they're full of renting customers. So I'm just,
Right.
they may not have a building on it.
Right. Yeah, when we specifically say vacant, that's what we mean. There is no building. It could have a parking lot. It could have so-called miscellaneous features, but the use for Department of Revenue purposes is vacant. As far as the approach to valuation, we consider the number of units that are available in terms of a storage or RV storage parcel. And then, again, as Brendan described, we use the income approach and cap out the value. If you have a concern or question on a specific parcel, you know, by all means, just reach out to the office in the proper channel, and we'll take a closer look at it.
So where you're valuing it is that right-hand column where it says value is where you've taken the number of units per square foot?
Per square foot?
The amount of income that can be derived per square foot
The
on
number of
a,
units available for rent, for example, can be used to cap out and develop a value. Is that what you're referring to?
I'm just trying to figure out how you're coming up with valuations on boat and car storage.
Yeah,
Property.
specifically the number of units that are available
Okay,
for
well, I'll
rent. So
meet with you more.
Yeah, if on specifics, let's go ahead and use like a direct channel so we can look at that specific parcel and we can properly answer thoroughly.
I got one more.
Yes, ma'am.
The bane of my existence, Grand and 54. And I know I asked you guys some questions. It's a strip club. You have it valued at, I think they pay $1,000 a year in taxes, but we know that the person who bought the business paid $1.5 million. But they're only paying $1,000 a year taxes.
Right. So a couple issues to consider in any commercial property is we're trying to establish value based on the income of that property, the property specifically in terms of rent.
So it must be making over $1.5 million. It
Well-
must be making a lot of money if they paid that much for it.
Right. So here's the thing. You have to differentiate what is rental income versus what is business income. So you said this is a strip club, correct?
Yeah.
Their business income could be substantial. That means nothing to us in terms of developing value for real estate purposes, for real property. Now, if somebody's going to buy that business, they probably are going to do their due diligence and find out, okay, what kind of income are they bringing in as a business, and they're buying that business. But if they're buying just the structure and the land underneath, they should not consider at all the business income. So under mass appraisal, we use rental income specific to buildings rather than business income. That's a big difference.
So you on the storage units, you'll actually put a price on it because those are buildings.
On the storage unit, because specific to that land, you can have X amount of units.
Yes.
That's why we use that information for capping out a value.
Okay.
But for something like that, or even like, say, years past, we had issues with Walgreens, CVS, things like that. They make a bunch of money annually. However, their buildings, if they were left vacant, only a certain type of folk would want to situate themselves in those corner parcels, and they probably wouldn't be making as much as a pharmacy. So some folks confuse the business income with just the land and structure rental potential, and they got caught in the past, and they were sued, and we are very careful of differentiating business income and rental income.
Right. So we see units where they have storage units for individual storage units for people to rent and store their extra goods in there. But you also have where you have open space or have covered sites for like boats or even
Right.
RVs. So
Yeah, we consider, when we develop the income approach, the income and expense documentation that we keep considers miscellaneous income, miscellaneous expenses, vacancy, the different types of units that are available, all those kind of characteristics, because again, it's specific to what is available on that land.
So you actually get the information from them, what they charge for their units?
Right.
And then you go from there?
Right, we annually send out an income and expense form. We get a decent response to it, and then we compile a market analysis, and we generalize those figures to develop the values across the board. When we get to the value adjustment board, or if we get to some sort of trial or hearing outside of VAB, then we may go specifically on the income information provided to us by that property owner. Before then, we don't publicize it. It is confidential information.
Right.
So,
Ms. Starkey?
So I just looked up that property at Grandin 54.
yes,
And I think 2 years ago, they paid $1.5 million for it.
yes.
But they're valued at
So
$277,000.
historically, if you look at it, the previous owners were mortgaging that property. They're the ones that have the loan out there for the buyer. So they put up the money basically on the loan to the prospective buyer, presumably because they couldn't get private lenders to facilitate that transaction. I can only assume that's happened at least twice, and you see some very large numbers in
I
those
saw the one below
transactions.
at $850,000.
Yeah, you see some very large numbers. Again, those are anomalies compared to what we see sell in the market. There's this relationship between the buyer and the seller when the seller is offering, the owner finance. And those type of details are considered in order for us to decide whether or not we're going to utilize that transaction as part of our assessment process. In the eyes of the Department of Revenue, that transaction is actually disqualified. We are not allowed to use that because there is a relationship. We don't know the details of that relationship.
Well, should we ask? Should we find out? I mean, that's a big difference.
Yes, absolutely. We asked through the income and expense information because there's a sales verification documentation. We will reach out as needed. What we won't do is pick on an individual parcel.
Well, we can look at all the strip clubs. Then we can
right.
just
So
not single out one.
Right. So that's what we try to do, is we try to group them as a whole, and we approach it very uniformly and try to avoid singling out any particular one parcel.
It just bothers me that other people are carrying their burden.
I understand. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, especially that kind of club.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
and I apologize for being late. My dad was in the hospital. I thought I was going to get on early, and I got tied up,
Right.
so I got mixed up with the time, so sorry for that. On this strip club, I mean, if CVS bought the building, they'd spend $1 million for the same building too, tear it down, put up a building, go in revenue. So it's a prime piece of real estate, prime. I don't know why, I mean, I think you should really take a close look. I don't think you really can depend on a strip club giving the true numbers, frankly. I think you need to find the best way to actually look at that without getting into their numbers and everything else that goes on there. But I think you need to take a strong approach. And if that's property sold for $1 million something,
$1.5 million.
$1.5 million, and you're only assessed for $276, we need to really, really look at that.
I
I've got to
understand.
tell you something, even if you base it upon just that, I would treat it just like a CVS. What do you charge CVS for their building? Based upon the same square footage, put the same number to it,
All right,
without
that-
having to verify.
Right, thank you for your suggestion.
Thank you.
Well, square footage, that building is little,
But somehow he's got to figure it, but it's got to be a big number.
but it's paying far less than any other buddy on the other commercial corners on that intersection.
And I'll tell you, I had, when I bought my first house in Pasco, I bought it for a really good price, and I actually called Mike Wells Senior up, and I says, you just made move my assessment up like 40 grand from what I paid. How'd you do that? He says, we based upon what the value is, not to what you paid for it. And I says, okay, and on we went. But this is the same thing. If the property's worth $1.5 million that they paid for it, that's got to tell you the revenue, you got to base it upon that.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for your report.
Thanks. Hey, Brendan, can you send me that statutory language on how you have to assess, please? Yes. Thanks. When we were out at the CNU conference, and I mentioned this to Mike Wells, we had an amazing presentation, David Engel and I, from a person that we're going to bring here for a company called Urban 3 that went over property valuations from all around the country, and every state has their own statutes on how you value property. So I was very interested in what ours is.
All right. Brendan, thank you again so much for all of that information. It was very educational. I feel very informed, so I'm hoping the rest of the audience also does as well. All right, so back to budgety stuff. So the assumptions leading into the numbers that we're going to talk about today. We are assuming no change in the operating millage that was adopted at the final hearing in September of last year at 7.5700 mils. No change in the fire MSTU at the 2.1225 mils that was also adopted last year. We are not looking to change the stormwater assessment. We are in the 4th year of our water and wastewater rate resolution, and we are moving into the 6th out of the 7th year of our solid waste 7 for 7 plan. All right, so one of the economic indicators that our office likes to look at to try to look inside a crystal ball into the future is tons of trash and how that kind of moves and aligns with our total taxable value. All right, so here's our total taxable value, this green line. And now look at our solid waste. And so when we look at our tons of trash, we usually get an early warning sign of, let's say, 2 to 3 years of what might be occurring from an economic standpoint. So you'll notice back in 2005, in that yellow box, our trash kind of flatlined. A couple years later, we did see a dip in our assessed values. So the two are very correlated. When we watch these lines kind of move and jive together, it's not accidental. So we're looking and estimating 24 to start to see some of that flatlining again in that tonnage. So this includes the trash that we handle internally as well as the trash that we are shipping out to our neighbors to handle on our behalf while our waste to energy expansion is underway. So this doesn't necessarily mean that the economy is going to turn around and nosedive. However, this is something we look at because we don't really have a crystal ball, so we have to look at some early indicators to let us know, do we proceed with caution or are we going to be gangbusters? So another one that we look at are our new home permits. So what we're starting to see from a permitting landscape is our new home permits are leveling off. We are seeing an uptick in those permits related to investments in homes that people already have, think remodels and things like that. And we are seeing an uptick in commercial permitting. And I'd be remiss not to show this slide where you see back from 2000 the ebbs and flows of our assessed values, right? So you'll see that spike in 07, 08, and then we came back down, and we are, albeit over a longer period of time, seeing that same kind of trend. So we're not expecting our assessed values to remain at the highs that we've seen over the past couple of years. All right, but we did get our June numbers. So we had been planning You all will remember we met with you in March, and we have been planning a 10% increase in taxable assessed values based off of historical, some of those indicators that we just discussed. Well, we did get our preliminary numbers from the property appraiser's office, and it did come in at 12.8% higher than last year. So that's a little bit more than what we have been planning. And so what does that translate into? 42 million more of property taxes. The sheriff's allocation is 40% of that new growth, so that is 17 million, which is a little bit more than the budget he submitted, because when he submitted his budget, we did not have these numbers. So he was also working off that 10% growth assumption that we were using. Slight increase to our CRAs and slight increase to our TIFs. And what that translates to for our fire MSTU is about just shy of 12 million more in revenue. But we don't just look at the property tax revenue increase as an indicator of what we might have to spend, because our general fund is a complex beast at best. So let's talk about our general fund in the big picture. So we're estimating if fiscal year 24 plays out the way we planned for it to play out, we're estimating $142 million in fund balance to start the year. All of the revenues that come into the general fund, we're estimating to be about $548 million. And then our planned expenditures in the presentation that we're going over today is looking at roughly $583 million, which would give us an ending fund balance of $107 million. In that is the $83 million reserve requirement for the 60 days of our operating expenditures. All right. So I just went over a whole lot of really big numbers. Now I'm going to use a picture because this helps me make sense of what all of that means. So that $583 million, we wanted to break it up into types of expenses that make sense, right? So 84% of that $583 million I just showed you on the previous slide is what we need to just keep the lights on, to do the same stuff we're doing today, tomorrow. In our budget, about 7% of it is attributed to the cost of things being more, so inflation. Think of materials costing more, equipment costing more, fuel costing more. So right off the top, 91% of that $583 million is attributed to just doing the same work we do today, tomorrow. 4% of the budget that we're presenting to you is encompasses what we call requirements. And we have a slide dedicated to what those specifics are, but think the fourth shift for fire rescue that we're standing up in the middle of 26. Think the jail expansion operation, right? We're expanding a jail. Well, we're going to have to put warm bodies in there to work it. 1% of our budget is what we call enhancements. Think of those as business plan initiatives, so increasing levels of service. It might be new programs that our staff has brought forward, and those things that the county administrator and the assistant county administrators are considering and recommending to the board as good programs or level of service increase that we think hit your priorities. And then 4% of the overall budget is capital, so one-time expenses, and we'll get into what those details are as well. So truly, 5% of this overall budget is possibly new expanded services, while 95% is just keeping the lights on and doing those things we've already said we've done.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
And just to make a point, I know we talked about this yesterday in the budget. On that capital 4%, some of the things that are in there were things that were in the GO bond that fell short because of increased expenses. So frankly, that capital is part of what we committed to do for the voters already.
Right.
Yep, and yes, thank you, Commissioner, and we will get into those details. All right, so that 4% requirement. So as I discussed, we've got the jail expansion underway right now. Well, we are going to need to put some people in there to run that thing. And there's no possible way that we could hire all of those FTEs upon the time that it's ready to work. So we've got a multi-year phased-in approach to staffing the expansion. And so what you're seeing right here is year 2 of that expansion plan. Also baked in here is a wage increase. So we are working on a pay study right now. We are modeling a 5% increase. That pay study is underway, so we're not really going to know how that's going to shake out. And so those are more discussions to come. We have baked in the new retirement rates that have just passed. We're also estimating union wage increases for our corrections folks and our firefighters. Supervisor of elections needs some tabulators to make sure that there's security. We've got 10 additional sheriff deputies baked in. We've got, as I discussed earlier, we are also doing a phased-in approach to make sure that we are ready to turn the lights on that D shift based off the contractual obligation. And the other constitutional officers, so our property appraiser, tax collector, supervisor, property appraiser, supervisor of elections, and the clerk. We don't have the tax collector yet. We get his August 1st. That's the net increase for the other three constitutionals. We have baked in the full base requests into the budget that they have submitted this year. And then we just wanted to remind the board that we do have $310,000 for operational expenses for Pasco's homelessness program that Kathy Pearson and her team is working to stand up. All right, so we've got a list here of general fund enhancements, and commissioners, we have been discussing these over the past week, and part of what we want to discuss with you all and make sure that we haven't missed our priorities, right? We think we heard what your priorities were. We've put some things together. We're bringing them before you, and we really just need to know, have we missed anything? Is there a priority that we've overlooked, something we should be putting some resources towards that we just haven't done yet? So I will pause for some dialogue if you all have any.
Any questions?
Well, is the tree person in there?
So I think we had ample discussion on an arborist, and I think right now the strategy that would best suit that, Commissioner, is if we're making wholesale changes right now to the tree ordinance and how we leverage and use tree mitigation funds. I think the best way to handle that is once those changes right now are actually being discussed with industry. So we're working hand in hand with industry to ensure that changes we make we're in lockstep with each other. So when we bring that ordinance forward, I think at that point in time it would behoove us, because we'll know what kind of level of service we'll want to provide there, and then we can make those decisions at that time. If it's an arborist or two, those positions won't necessarily break the bank, but we'll have a good sight picture on what.
Because there's a lot of money out there for rebuilding your tree canopy, and I think an arborist on board will
Yeah, and I
more than
think
pay
these-
for itself with those grants.
Yes, ma'am, and I think these ordinance changes are going to meet with what the board's intent is on preserving our existing tree canopy and helping to rebuild it as well.
Mr. Waitman?
Thanks, Chair. How is D shift, the entire D shift, $300,000 less than 10 sheriff deputies?
You're looking, and I'll just jump in real quick. Commissioner, the fire rescue budget is actually allocated across the fire MSTU and then a portion of the general fund. So what you're seeing there is maybe a third of what the total cost is represented. The rest of that will be covered in the fire MSTU. Rescue cannot be handled by the fire MSTU. The general fund captures those costs.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And then follow up. We have in the pie chart here, 4% are used for capital, one-time capital expenditures. Do we historically use the entire allocated holdback percentage for capital expenditures in a year? Do we, like, for example, here, 4%, are we planning to spend whatever this value of this 4% is this year? Will it be spent completely?
Typically that's the plan. Sometimes projects will either be delayed or they go, and then in which case those funds are typically carried forward to stay with the project. If it looks like a project's not going to be done, it'll generally be canceled, and then those funds will be returned.
And Commissioner, some of that has to do with just where's the project in its life cycle? Do we already have design completed? So are we putting construction money to it this year? So some of it, how quickly does it move, depends on where that project is and its specific life cycle.
And I think we can discuss those specific projects actually on the next slide and kind of give you a good indication of where we think those will set us.
Ms. Starkey? Go ahead.
Well,
Thank
since-
you.
Yeah,
since-
finish. You finished?
Seth, since you brought it up, we have a lot of people here, Sheriff. Could you maybe want to explain the 10 deputies at $2 million? Because they're not making $200,000 each a year. So do you want to explain how that cost breaks out in your department?
We would,
The 10 deputies?
So very briefly, that's starting, I will button down. I use the mic end hold down or?
I'm not sure you need the mic. So-
are we getting out of order here?
Okay, thanks.
No, I'm just on this.
Appreciate it. So very quickly, before I get started, I want to thank Lisa Brown. Lisa Brown's our CFO. So she puts the budget together. Lisa started with us when she was 10 years old. She's been with us for 30 years. But honestly, we have a professional staff that puts the budget together and does everything. And so with these calculations, very briefly for the board, $200,000 is the rough estimate for a starting deputy. The reason why that is starting equipment, you know, you have to get a vehicle, you have to get the equipment, body armor, shields, all the equipment that adds up to it. Yes, their starting salary is in the 50s, but benefits, FRS, and as everybody in this room realizes, FRS goes up again. But that's basically when you add all the costs for a new deputy, that's added in there, and then that rolls over because they're not buying a new vehicle every year, but that amount is added in when we first hire a new deputy.
And it's one deputy per vehicle? Every deputy gets its own vehicle?
Every patrol deputy gets their own vehicle. Yeah.
So, okay.
All right.
All right, so now we'll look at what that 4% capital and what those items are, right? So the first bit is what we're looking at, what our facilities director likes to call keeping people happy. So these are things that our customers have requested, and his recommendation is that we fund the number one request from all of our customers to include the constitutional officers and the board department. The second line is what our facilities director calls keep the buildings happy. So these are the number one priorities we need to keep buildings moving the way they're moving. So think roof replacements, think HVAC replacements, those kinds of things. Our third line here is an investment into our IT, think things like cybersecurity and servers, the thing Mike likes to say, the thing in the closets that go, and keep us all able to work every day. That fourth line is a small investment into our facilities master plan. So think when we have to do remodels, we've got building relocations, things like that. We use this funding source to pay for those types of things. We are looking at, I'm not going to go through all of these because everyone will be so bored. The sheriff has requested that we redo the restrooms at the gun range, so we are proposing that. We're in phase 2 of a supervisor of elections office renovation. So to Commissioner Waitman's question before, how much of this will get spent? Again, it depends on the phase of the project and where it is in its life cycle. So this project, we're moving into the second phase to wrap up and finalize this one. So we would expect that to be fully expended by the end of the fiscal year. We did get some legislative earmark to design a new emergency operations center, but there is a grant match portion to that. So what you see up here is $1 million for our piece of that design money. And then we are also going to put $500,000 towards what would it look like to co-locate other key operations in that same facility. So to figure out what would that design truly look like, we've got some walking around money to start having those conversations and get a conceptual design in place. The Anderson Family Park, so here's another good example of where a project is in a life cycle. So we have demolished an existing facility, we have designed what's to come, and now this $1.5 million is to construct that design. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't, to Commissioner Mariano's point, our Hudson Library renovation. So we did go out for general obligation bonds, and unfortunately, due to the timing, we were right smack dab in the middle of COVID where things just started to cost more money. It became a lot more challenging to get materials, and so we did see an increase in cost. So our general obligation bond was not enough to finish that 7th and final library remodel. So we are recommending that we take some of that fund balance I discussed a few slides back, and let's go ahead and do what the voters voted on and get that library renovated. And then the tax collector is, he's paying a portion to have a office built, I believe, over in Angeline, and he has asked us to assist with the parking expenses for that. So the county administrator is recommending we go ahead and do that. Do you guys have any questions about what you see up here?
I have a question on the library renovation.
Yep.
Is that about what each library cost, about that much money? I mean, that's a lot of money, so I'm just curious. I mean, it seems like you build a brand-new, beautiful library for $12 million.
Here he comes.
Yes, ma'am. So it depends on the size of the building. Hudson is a 36,000 square foot facility. Our current estimates for the Wesley Chapel Library, which are 14,000 square feet, came to $11 million. So
That's to build a brand-new one.
that's to build a brand new one, yes.
But this is just to renovate an existing one.
It's,
It's double the
it's like
size?
3 times the
Yeah,
size
but
of
you're
that.
renovating, not building a new one, so.
unfortunately, the Hudson Library is about 40 years old, and there are significant areas that need improvement. The parking lot is in need of work. The building envelope is in need of work. The roof is in need of work, and the interior of the building and the wooden floors, which are one of its greatest features, are going to need significant work as well. All of this adds up to a pretty significant
So you're
cost.
adding square footage also to that Hudson Library?
This is currently just the building envelope as it exists. We can sometimes play around the edges in a remodel, and it is something that will be considered. Design is hoping to start within the next few weeks to a month, and so we're going to see where we can go with that, sir.
Right.
Because there's a lot of innovation and expansion of the maker spaces, the recording studios that are in there that might be possible as well.
Well, I think it's very important for our libraries and to be kept up for our citizens, and we all care about, that they're up and running and do the right thing for our citizens, so, okay. Yeah, Mr. Mariano?
We did talk to you about that recording studio. It might even be better to put in a separate little building right to the side as well, so that could be an advantage.
Absolutely, sir. That, we plan to look at all of that in the design of the actual building. That hopefully will begin, as I said, relatively soon. So we're trying to factor in as much as we can get with what we've got.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sean. All right, so we also wanted to take just a brief 5-year outlook on what else we're planning in the general fund. It is pretty modest. We usually don't plan too far ahead in the general fund because that funding is a bit restrictive. But things that the county administrator is looking to continue to invest in is our current facilities, right? So you will see we are modeling $5.5 million to keep those buildings happy, and roughly 1.6 to keep our customers happy. We do intend to continue to invest and reinvest in our IT security. And we are building some money in for an animal shelter expansion. I don't know if Mike wants to talk a little bit
Yes,
about
I was
that
about
one.
to ask about that.
Sure, yeah, the board had approved us to continue with the design of that, hopefully to push forward on some appropriations. And as such, we've put forward a commitment of 50% of the estimated cost of that, with the hopes there that if an appropriation were to come by, we would be shovel-ready and ready to go. That design, I think, is just about complete, and I know those lobbying activities are underway. So we wanted to make sure that that was earmarked and included in our modeling, so we could, ensure that if those things happen, we could afford it.
All right, and then we are, the $3.9 million in that next line that you see, that is debt service for finishing up our jail expansion and our VOPH Super Park. And then you'll see here, we've got the total from the previous slide, so we're looking at roughly $47 million for our 5-year CIP outlook.
Actually, I want to jump in
Yep.
on that just a little bit, and that'll be coming before the board. But the budget team did a phenomenal job of leveraging some existing. We had them reserved as ARP funds for VOPH Park, but it was spread out over years. But by leveraging and consolidating that into a debt, it's freed up some cash flow, which is allowing us to do some of the things that we're talking about here, namely, and Amy has hit on it, reinvesting in our facilities infrastructure. It's something that we really, just like our parks, just like our water utility, our roads, it's an underlying theme here in the county that we've, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's been neglected a little bit, and so we've got to make those reinvestments if we're going to keep those pieces of infrastructure alive and working, both for the people, but more importantly for the citizens. And so I felt that it was important to point that out, that the team has kind of helped free that up, because those are things that we can pay for in cash, whereas super parks and portions of jail expansions are better suited for large debt issuances, and we can manage that. We can manage the debt payments as well as the interest, especially as the markets change. But I just kudos to the budget team for that, because it's really provided some flexibility for us to do good things.
All right, any other questions? Okay.
All right, so then that 91% of the pie, right, that keep the lights on to make sure that we're able to do tomorrow all of the services our customers have come to expect of us today. So we just pulled out our bigger departments in the general fund, just so you can see the variation from last year to this year, right? So a couple that I'd like to note, because there's been a lot of prudent budgeting and really good fiscal stewardship happening throughout the county. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't just take the opportunity to talk about all of that hard work that's occurred. So our corrections department, you all will remember that you approved a medical contract that increases each year above and beyond the $4.6 million that their operating budget has increased. And that's because they are finding efficiencies everywhere they can to make sure that they're minimizing the impact of those increases. Our fire rescue team, they're standing up 2 new stations this year. We have built in FTEs for stations 2 and 4 to go live this year. And they have also worked so hard on good fiscal stewardship and finding efficiencies everywhere they can. So the impact to all of those FTEs is we're really feeling that in a small way.
Right.
And so, I could tell stories about all of them, but I just wanted to really highlight the good work that's happened. So all of my friends here, thank you. It's been a fun budget cycle. All right, so county attorney's budget. So we're looking at a nominal increase over the previous year, and most of this is attributed to the fact that for this year, we had built in a vacancy factor, but he's working very hard to make sure all of his FTEs, and he's fully staffed, right? So we wanted to take that vacancy factor away, because the plan is he's gonna spend every one of those salary dollars, right? And there's some things that him and his office are looking at this year to make sure that they can stay competitive in that hiring market. And so Jeff, I don't know if you wanted to share a little bit.
Be happy to. Part of the proposal is we're currently out of space. I've got 1 vacant office because we just constructed one out of what had been file cabinets space. And so we have put in the budget the ability to construct offices for the part of why lawyers haven't been hired is we don't have space to put them in. So we're trying to remedy that this year. We have had 2 positions out in the market for the last 3 months anyway, maybe some longer than that. Basically, what we are getting in applicants are people who are coming right out of law school. They don't have local government experience. They don't have experience in the field that we need them. We are competitive on the younger level with our surrounding counties and cities. We are not competitive in the senior tier, which exposes myself and the board to those senior lawyers moving to another jurisdiction.
Is that, we just lost a really good attorney at, yeah.
We lost a mid-tier lawyer.
Yeah.
We have 3 potential candidates. One senior lawyer to fill this position that just left, and an additional procurement lawyer, and one land use lawyer that we have or will be extending offers by the end of this week.
Okay.
And where are you finding room for more offices?
I'm gonna move into Mike's office.
Sounds like closets.
To close the loop on that, so a couple slides back, we had talked about $1.08 million that Mike is recommending for facilities non-CIP. One of those, number one, customer requests that we are recommending we fund is Jeff's request to solve that space issue that he has.
Yeah. I'm just wondering where you're going to make other people's offices smaller? I've been in the upstairs there, so.
Well, they may not be in the office proper. They may be on the floor, but not in the office proper, or, I don't know. The other thing we're exploring is whether or not we can have lawyers share office space and remotely work positions. But that's kind of where we're exploring those issues.
And we have some money set aside to do so.
Okay.
All right, so here you'll see a slide of what we label outside funding. And so anything on this slide that is italicized and bolded are state mandate payments that we have. So we've got Medicaid, Pasco Kids First, public assistance hospitalization, burials and cremations, health department annual contribution, Bay Area legal services, and Bay Care. All of these are state mandated expenses that we have. Those below are board's discretion, right? So that's over the years the board has decided that we will contribute to some way to these other organizations. And so we are estimating the Medicaid numbers. I think my team got those late last week, so we're still building those into the budget. Pasco Kids First, there's an almost $19,000 increase. By and large, things have remained the same. When you get down to Premier Healthcare, it looks like we have reduced their budget by $250,000, but really the board approved one-time funding to help them finish up a remodel. So their typical annual contribution is that you all adopt is $150,000. You will see a bullet where they have requested a one-time $500,000 for this year. And then it looks like we reduced United Way by $20,000, but really we provided them with $20,000 for cold weather sheltering. And when that pot of money runs out, then they'll come back and ask for more. So far, it has not run out. They still have some. So that money's just going to carry forward until fully expended. Yep.
On the veterans cremation burial, I want to be sure that everyone gets buried. So is that enough? See, we didn't do it in '24, so is this something new for us? And
Yes, ma'am. It is new. Actually, we had brought something to the board a few months back to do it. It's kind of taking existing payments and monies that we get from the VA and then reinvesting it back for veterans. So it was a new program, ingenuitive on Kathy's team's part. And I don't know, Kathy, if you or Brian Hopen want to share more with the board about the program. Okay, so.
thanks, that's important, and
Yeah.
we want to support that 100%. Yeah.
Mr. Whiteman.
Thank you, Chair. So Premier Health has come back-to-back years with one-time ask, right? So what did we give them last year? 250 for one-time ask, and they're asking for another 500, so that's one-time ask totaling 750,000 for 2 budget cycles. I really would like to know, I know what Premier does and appreciate the work in our community, but with a taxpayer investment, I'd really like to know what our taxpayer is overall, big picture, receiving from investing in healthcare. I know they say hospital costs, but hospitals are not-for-profits or for-profit businesses. So I asked this question last year, so it's 2 years running. So curious to to understand what we're investing in with this.
Understood. I think we can probably arrange some meetings with Premier to, again, help define, and they can reevaluate, let the board know what their mission is, how they serve the public, and, and that'll give you information that you need to make that decision.
And I think
Paula, thank you.
I have a meeting coming. Oh, Paula's going to talk to that?
Good,
Okay.
thank you, Paula.
Okay.
Good morning, Commissioners. Paula Racaldo, Support Services. So this is low-income health services for our most vulnerable. They are also, in fact, receiving another allocation to connect primary care to mental health services through the opioid funding. But this $500,000 request is to make up for some short-term losses that they face due to increase in prices of medication and also shortage in Medicare costs.
So I'll follow up this. How is that the taxpayers' issue? Why are public dollars needed to offset that when the public doesn't necessarily have to invest in the program?
So while not all residents will benefit from those medical services, our most vulnerable do.
Yeah,
And so
free
normally.
free medical care.
And
It's
if I
not
may,
free. We're
Commissioner.
investing $750,000 in the last 2 years, so it's not free. This is an outside expense. This isn't a mandatory expense. So this board is choosing whether or not to take taxpayer funds, at not the choice of the taxpayer, to invest in healthcare. I just want to understand what we're getting if we choose to take taxpayer money and investing in it. I appreciate the mission. It's a fantastic mission. Joey and his team do a great job in serving our community. This has nothing to do with that. This has everything to do with what's the taxpayer overall, all of us that pay taxes, return on our investment. That's all I want to know.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mariano?
Mr. Resnick, this past week, I know he's trying to meet with everybody. If I haven't met with you yet, he's trying to get new calendars. The billing that they get, the funding they get has been cut different ways, and that's where the shortfall is coming in. I will say that if you just happen to be in the hospital like 3 of the last 4 days, I'm there at nighttime, and I'll tell you, those emergency rooms are packed. And could they be taken care of? Maybe through Premier, possibly. But if we can support Premier and keep people from going out of the emergency room, which costs us a whole lot more money,
Agreed.
it's a good thing to fund. It's a good
Yeah.
return to keep them going to regular care as opposed to not. Matter of fact, we were looking at setting a bus service at one point to run from Hudson Avenue going up to Denton. So to take people really at the hospital, pick them up from there if they don't really need emergency care, take them up to Premier, bring them up through there and swing it around.
Very smart.
So they save us a whole bunch of money from emergency rooms.
So I'd like clarity on that. How is someone, so this is where I have not gotten an answer yet. So someone goes to the emergency room, and there's Premier out there that also provides services. How is the county taxpayer saving money with folks going to the emergency room or not going to the emergency room? Is it an ambulance wait time? Like, what are we looking at here?
Yeah, so-
How is it saving the taxpayer? I mean, these are non-for-profit, outside enterprises, right? So how are we, the taxpayer of Pasco County, saving money with this deal?
Yeah, so I think the example you brought up is the one that I was going to use is, if, for example, emergency rooms are clogged with folks that are there seeking treatment for, what is a non-emergency, but, ERs have to treat them. One, that adds costs for hospitals, but two, the more crowded an emergency room is, that could lead to increased wait times, especially even for our EMS staff, who, as we know, is the third busiest ambulatory service in the state of Florida. And so the longer wait times that we have there at ER is one less ambulance that is actually on the street. So if you can unclog the ERs, theoretically, that's one avenue. Another avenue is, this is clearly a policy decision, from the board. We have, helping hospitals be more successful, I think, is critical. And I think that, providing, even modest investments to low-income citizens is within your charter. The rest of it, I would say, even with hospitals, right, direct payment providers, that program, we're going to be coming back to you with an ordinance. The board directed the county attorney and myself to bring something back here this summer. That direct payment provider program would also, again, help ensure that hospitals are getting reimbursed for indigent health care for folks that maybe are indigent and have to end up in an emergency room. So I think it's several pieces of the puzzle, Commissioner, but I think really the most direct correlation that I can make is right there to hospitals and ER and wait times and getting our ambulances back out on the
I
streets.
just think we need to be careful. It's a slippery slope when government starts getting overly involved in healthcare. So, and this is an example of that. It's a step. So I just want to be cautious as we potentially continue to weigh and invest in healthcare with public dollars.
Understood. This is
Mike,
a one-time
Mike,
request
as
that they
part-
made, so.
As part of the issue that Premier's having, and probably other hospitals have some of the same thing, I know we're talking about that discounted in Medicare and helping out in those areas, but some of this due to the inflation and the costs that are going up, and they're not able to keep up with it with their billing, or?
Yeah, it's my understanding they're squeezed as well. I don't know if Paula has any more light she can shine on that.
Right.
And while she's coming up, I have a question for Kathy. Is there CDBG money for Premier?
Kathy Pearson, Assistant County Administrator, Public Services. They have gotten CDBG dollars. They've also gotten opioid dollars too, I believe, for hiring a psychiatrist. With the CDBG dollars, we're helping them with some construction on renovating a building for them to use more mental health. So they do receive those dollars too.
When AmSkills, when we were up in Washington getting our national award from CDBG, I think it was Sarasota County was also receiving an award. There were 5 in the country, and these were these were CDBG projects. They had a project called, I think it's called Project Smile, where they had a nonprofit that was helping their residents get teeth. And I really want to do something like that here because sometimes that keeps people from getting a job. And they're using CDBG money. So if Premier can do that, that's what I want to try when I speak with Joey, if he can do a program like that.
I do want to remind the board that Premier is our federally qualified healthcare center in the
Yes.
county. So they are federally qualified to
Yes,
receiving
they do a
funds.
great job.
Right.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay.
And
Yes,
the Premier's doing the dental care out in Dade City.
He's what? They're what?
They're doing dental care out in Dade City. I think they're,
Yeah, no, but I want to do this, not just care, I want them to do this Smile project.
yeah, I think it's a great idea. The
Yeah.
health, safety, and welfare of a citizen is what we're supposed to take care of, and Premier's right in the middle of that health lane.
If they're sick, they're not working.
Right.
They're not
Paula, you have something
making
to
money.
add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say just an example of 2 of their most recent projects. They just opened up clinics on the west side and the east side that partner with the schools as well, so that the parents don't have to take off to take the children to the doctor. They can treat them basically on site in those co-located operations. And so that also kind of helps those parents be more productive in our community. The efforts and what they do for our community is tremendous. And just those linkages between physical health and mental health that you're going to start seeing, hopefully will address some of the other issues that we're seeing in terms of opioid epidemic and mental health and substance use disorder in our community. So, but just to reiterate, some of the issues that they are facing is that shortfall in Medicaid, and then also the shortfall for the medications. The cost of medications have gone up, and those savings that they normally would qualify for are not being passed down to them.
It's just very easy for programs like this and programs across all over the entire spectrum to come to government and ask for funds. And I just am very cautious with helping folks, and they become over-reliant on taxpayer dollars year after year to continue what they're doing. And next thing you know, we have this big bloated, taxpayer, public dollars subsidized program. So I just want to be mindful of this.
So I think from Mr. Waitman's standpoint that we need some more information on that issue, so. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
For previous boards, when Premier first came on board, and I appreciate every one of your questions, Commissioner Waitman, every single one of them. We've really kind of watched them close, and they haven't come back for us for too much, but they have needed help. And this is just a situation where the shortfalls they're being pinched on, they can't keep up. They're actually planning to do a pharmacy as well, and they're being restricted on that a little bit now too, so I plan to try to help them get through that process too. But literally for what they do for the dollar value, they haven't blown up like sometimes you see things do. They've kept their budgets tight, and they've been very productive, everything they've done, and I think really helped the citizens.
Yeah. They offer a lot of services in the whole county.
Trust but verify, right?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay, so now we're going to shift over to the budgets of our constitutional officers. And so as you can see, 4 of the 5 we have received budgets for. We got all of them timely this year. The one that we get later in the year is the tax collector. All right, so based off 24 adopted to the 25 request, here's how those things shook out. So there's an asterisk next to the sheriff because, as I stated earlier, his budget submission was based off an assumption of 10% taxable assessed value growth, but the growth we got from the preliminary numbers was actually 12.8. So that 40% is roughly a $4 million increase from what you're seeing on this slide. All right, so we have invited our constitutional officer friends to be at this workshop with us. So I will take the opportunity to pass the mic over if they want to touch on anything that's in their budget. If you don't want to, I can do it.
Thank you, Commissioners. Nikki Alvarez-Souls, Clerk and Controller. Thank you for having me here. My budget that was submitted is similar to how we expressed what we're going to be including in it at the prior workshop. The increase is, I think it's 11.6%, and it includes increases for cost of goods and services. A lot of it has to deal with inflation cost for operating expenses as well as information technology. And in addition to that is increased personnel cost. We've budgeted a 5% increase in wages to be in line with the county's request, or they're also budget submittal of 5%. My understanding is that once this pay study is complete with the county, that if it is a higher percent increase, that we would also be seeking the same percent increase as the county in whenever that pay study is done. In addition, there are 2 new positions that we're requesting. One is for our board's records department. Those are the team members that are here in the boardroom with you. And there's a lot of work that's done inside and outside of these meetings. And there have been a lot more workload included in that. There's a lot more hours in meetings, and there's a lot of agenda items that have been added since. In addition, we handle the Value Adjustment Board in the county, and the Value Adjustment Board petitions have increased. We provided those statistics to you at the last board meeting. We had during the Great Recession time, we had cut a position out of board records, so you're talking about 2009, and we're seeking 1 position back because of the additional workload in that department. And then the other position is in our financial services department, and that department, about 91% of the workload is for the board, and about 9% of the workload is for my office. We are looking at adding an additional team member for that area because there have been a lot more reporting requests, pronouncements coming down through the different, let me get the word correct. Hold on just a second. So there's been GASB pronouncements. There are 4 different ones that have just come out that our team has been working on in the last 2 years to current year, and it is very labor intensive, and we need an additional personnel to be able to manage those additional financial reports. Are there any questions for me?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. Thank you. I was listening to so I'm on the board of NACO and a few other parts of NACO, that every few months we have a big meeting. It's virtual. And this last one, they had a woman on, and I got on late, so I don't remember her title, but she was talking about AI and what it brings to government. And one of the projects that she was very excited about was in the court system and the value that AI is going to bring to operational costs. So I wondered if you've started looking at any of that. And I don't even understand what that means and how that works, but I just know she said it's going to be really good for your department, so.
Yeah, so we have started down that endeavor actually a couple years ago, where we're utilizing it for auto docketing. So when documents are electronically filed with our office, the AI will read the document, identify what type of document it is, docket that to the case, and it provides information on, was it filed by the plaintiff or was it filed by the defendant? I don't know off the top of my head the percent of the total dockets that AI is helping us with, but we're always looking to keep and continue to improve that. So that's just one area that we are working on.
So I guess we elected officials that watch over these budgets are always hoping that technological advances help reduce costs to the citizens. So hopefully we see costs go down sometimes because technology is saving a lot of money.
For operational costs, right?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Chair.
Mr.
Thank
Wakeman?
you. Did, you said 5% raises for your folks?
Correct, that's what's in the budget.
Good, thank you. Supportive of that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none? Okay. Thank you for your report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, so next we have two slides for the sheriff's request. The first slide outlines his base request, and then submitted along with his budget, he also had some additional requests, and so we do have a second slide for that. So Sheriff, if you wanted to touch on your base request, and let me know, and I'll kick it to the next slide.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you, Commissioners, and I apologize. As soon as I'm done this, I'm going to step out of the room. You heard our presentation probably about a month ago, so I don't want to reiterate everything again. The one thing is I just asked is that you make law enforcement priority, and as you approve every community and evaluate every community, we're fine with growth. We don't. That's your decision. We're okay if the county grows. We're just saying please let law enforcement grow proportionally with the growth of the community. As you know, from July of last year until January of this year, for the amount of growth that was approved, we would need 40 more deputies.
Sheriff, I heard that you mentioned that. I think that was in the paper.
Yeah.
And I wanted to address that, if you don't mind.
If you want to interrupt, that's fine.
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
bad habit I have. Do you want me to wait?
No, go ahead.
And I don't know who the right person is to address that, but because things got approved, doesn't mean they're going to get built. For example, we've approved a lot of apartment complexes that we may never see because well, for right now, there's no funding for anything, but a lot of these developments ask for entitlements and they never build out to those. For example, there's one in VOPH, there's a neighborhood that Homes by West Bay has, and they have entitlements of up to, I think, 3,500, but they're building 1,000 or 1,200 of those units. They're not building the 35. So I think we have to be careful when you're basing, when you use those numbers as if they're going to be built, because it's not reality.
All right. Chairman, Commissioner, do you understand? Remember what lag time was?
What?
Lag time for hiring deputies?
Yes.
Okay. So even if things don't all the way go through, we have about a 36-month lag time. And so that's why we continuously fall so far behind, because nobody has been saying, hey, we're going to build this. Sheriff's Office, let's start hiring now for things to get built. That's why we are so far behind. I apologize. I'm going to start getting passionate because I just looked at the call screen. We're holding 16 calls right now at 10:30 in the morning. So if we think that we've kept up with growth for law enforcement, we absolutely have not. And that's lives on the line. That's why I get passionate, because we're dealing about people's lives out there. So with that being said, you know, looked at the budget already. We already went through the discussion. The one thing too is when you look at additional deputies, we also have to consider we have to hire for bailiffs, we have to hire for SROs. So those aren't people that are hiring calls for service on the road. But I go back to it again. You know, the facility upgrades, that's great. I'm happy the libraries are going to get funded. Our people work in facilities that the toilets overflow. We have mice, rat, mold. So, sorry, Commissioner. You want to talk about our issues? I could talk about our issues. And I understand you all know them because we consistently get calls from commissioners saying, hey, can you look at this issue? Can you look at that issue? And we handle it. But those men and women out there, they are busting their butts every day, putting their lives on the line. They need to be a priority.
Mr. Whiteman?
Thanks, Sheriff. Thanks, Sheriff. And thank you and your team, Chase, and I guess you said Lisa Brown back there. 2 shout-outs today for, I guess, helping capture information for questions I've had. You know, Sheriff talks about 36-month lag time. Where are we looking at from the time we approve a project until the CO is issued? Is it roughly the same timeline, maybe a little less? I think if we look at the correlation between the two and you use the data that we have, knowing the sheriff's office timeline and when the CO comes and we capture, you know, we collect in arrears, and when the CO is issued, I think if we put a little time and effort in understanding how our decisions and the needs of sheriff's office parallel one another, that we might be able to closely measure in the budget of when we might need to pull the trigger on more funds, however we want to do them. I also believe, Sheriff, what are we, a year out from the expiration of your grant, the deputies grant? What's the, sorry, forgive me
Yes,
for the name of
Commissioner.
it.
As I said, I appreciate something you had brought up about looking at the COPS grant again. That'd be phenomenal if we could look at that.
So the COPS grants, you know, I think some of us are familiar with it. I assume we're here. It's kind of, it's free money. So I hope that we understand how we ever need to work together to respond. I was working with Chase and trying to understand, do we start application now or do we have to wait until that grant fully expires and then submit application for, you know, for resources there. So, again, I appreciate your comments there, Sheriff, and I'd like to see a little more data from the development world on our end and then with the sheriff's hiring time and see what that could look like in terms of dollars and cents decisions.
Okay. Ms. Starkey?
I think that is the right way to look at it, as the CO you know, how many COs do we have versus what we've approved, because it's very different. And I agree, that's a better way to.
Because that could be a very telling number and be the business sense justification on what we need to, where we need to pull funds. So Amy, what do we have sitting in our reserves, in our reserve fund to the reserve fund currently? I know that's not the proper name of it, but that's just what I call it.
So for the upcoming fiscal year, we're estimating roughly 83 million in that reserve account.
And what about the reserve account? I forgot what the name of it.
We only, in the general fund, there is only one, it's a
there's-
restricted reserve.
Did you find something out that we didn't
There
know
was
about?
a line item we didn't know, and we were doing our briefing a number of months ago. We had the reserve account, and then there was one underneath it, and I think it was you or somebody from the department described it as the reserves account.
Oh, so that's our ending fund balance above what might be in that reserve account. So
So it just holds there too, right? So you can kind of,
some of that money is, you're looking at spending, well, it's recommended to spend those capital items and then future capital items.
When we draw off of some.
I'll need some clarity on that as we go through this
Yeah.
process. A refresher. Thank you.
Yep, yes, absolutely.
Ms. Yeager?
Yeah, I think it's concerning, just, it's a Tuesday at 10:30, how many calls you have holding. Like, walk us through, like, on a busy day, because, I mean, for me, I feel like we could always use more law enforcement, but can you give us a scenario of, it's a Tuesday, on a busy day?
So, Commissioner, yeah, and it ebbs and flows. I mean, we're dealing with human lives. I wish that, if we were dealing with widgets, I could say, okay, every day we go to widgets, we take care of widgets and go widgets. We don't. We deal with human lives, and so humans are unpredictable. And so, on an average day, I mean, this afternoon, probably 1, 2 o'clock, we could start being backed up 20 calls. There's some times that we're actually not backed up, that we're actually handling. But the one thing is, as I go back to, we deal with human lives. Human lives, our suicide attempts in Pasco County have gone up. Our missing persons have gone up. You can't just say, oh, okay, just send one deputy. A person who's suicidal can turn homicidal immediately.
Yeah.
And so these are complex calls that we are continuously seeing a rise in. And I understand you can look at crime rates and say, okay, crime rates have gone down. Well, I think property crime in the future is going to go down. You talk about technology, we're going to see that. But what you can't capture is human lives and the complexity of going out to a suicide threat in progress. A mother wants to harm herself. She has 2 kids in that house. How do you handle that situation? So, getting to your point, Commissioner, is that's something that it ebbs and flows. It could go from peace and calm to all hell on earth breaking loose, and that's why I say, and it's no different than the fire department. The fire department, I know for them, they can go from being in that house and everything's fine to a structure collapse and a fire, and so. I wish we were dealing with widgets, because I could plan widgets out forever. We can't plan out human lives, and that's the difficult part.
Right. I just want to make sure that you guys are staffed, and also, when you were talking about your conditions and things like that, what the officers' conditions, I think that's something that we need to look into as well, so.
Sheriff, when I listened to Sheriff Galtieri's presentation at Pinellas County, he gave his crime statistics. Do we have a chart of our crime statistics? Theirs went down 30%. Do we know what ours are doing, or are we?
No, and we present them, and we can give them to you again. And I said, property crimes are dropping. There's no doubt about property crimes, and that's, I just put it out. Please lock your car doors.
You guys have a great program.
And the problem is, unfortunately, people don't lock their car doors. They leave guns in them, and that's where we see our issues. But property crimes will decrease in the future. With technology, property crimes will decrease in the future. What won't decrease in the future is human complexity. We are in a mental health crisis in this country, and those issues are going to escalate, because a deputy can't go out there and say, oh, okay, you stole this from the store, we're going to, that's easy. I mean, another thing is easy, but those are routine. And unfortunately, I can't use that word routine, but I do, but nothing in what we do is routine, but that's a commonplace. What isn't is go into those complex situations where consistently we're seeing neighbor disputes, people irate, and we're dealing with tempers, and all you have to do is look at your cell phones, and people get irate all the time. And that's what, first thing they do is call law enforcement, and that's what we go out and handle.
So, Sheriff, we're at 1 point what per 1,000? 1.2?
Yeah, we're
One.
was it, Chase, what was that number?
Yeah.
1.20, yep.
Okay.
1.00, sorry.
All right, and we want to get that number up. I think I heard Sheriff Galtieri say they fluctuate between 1.4 and 1.6. So for me, I'd like us to have a goal. I mean, it's not something we can do in 1 year, but I'd love to have a goal to start moving that percentage up. And so I don't know what that number is per year, but I'd like us to figure out what that is and then have a plan. And for me, part of that plan is the MSTU. And in your budget, that is besides the 10 that we add in, how many new deputies are in your budget? Do you budget for in your budget?
So we budget for 10, and then if you can go to the next slide. So the next slide, it'll be an additional, because we did not know. Oh, you got it? Here.
No,
Sorry, I just know, it's fine.
We got there.
Hey, you're making me dizzy.
I know it. So, there now, okay. So It would be 40 altogether because of the upgrade, so we'd be adding more deputies. The problem is, it's a lag time. So by the time, we say, oh, we got 40 more deputies, that's to hire, recruit, train. It's going to take a while to get them out there, so you're looking at 36 months. So the other one, too, is with Pinellas and Hillsborough, they also have school police. We don't have a school police. And so that's an issue that we already, that's about 40 personnel that we have in our school resource officer unit, that we share that cost with the school district, but at the same time that's a good amount of people that Hillsborough doesn't have. The other one too, or Pinellas, the other one too, Pinellas has St. Pete, Clearwater, Tarpon, Largo, Pinellas Park. We don't have large municipalities. Our municipalities make up 8% of our population, roughly. So we're 92%. It's a much different animal than Pinellas County because of what we deal with. The other one too is, our armored vehicle is falling apart. We just hit a couple complex situations this morning. We had to go after, we went into a neighborhood. There was a guy with child pornography. Child pornography guys are probably the most dangerous people to go hit a search warrant on because they have nothing to lose. They know they're guilty. They know they're going to go to prison. And they come out, and I was deputy in Broward County, and I was there when a child pornographer killed members of a law enforcement team that just knocked on the door, and it killed them with a shotgun. So we're not going to send our people into harm's way. We also went after drug houses this morning. So that's what we say we need is armored vehicles. To upgrade the forensics unit, you talk about technology, we always have to be ahead of the game because by the time we go to court, it could be several years from now, and we have to make sure that technology is there, that we can make sure the victim has been absolutely justified, and we protect them, and we give them all the rights and protections as they go to court so that they can have justice served. The pole barn, if you're going to invest in the vehicles, we don't want to leave them out there and get rained on, stormed on, and run down. So that's something else that we need the pole barn to protect those vehicles as we get them. And then the vehicle maintenance plan, as everybody realizes, the same with fire rescue. Penny for Pasco does not pay for all our vehicles. As we grow, that penny is only a small portion. So that's something that we need the additional vehicles for to get those fleets out there. But it's one of those things with the funding, and I appreciate it, Commissioner Starkey, and that's something, that's a great point. If you would lead the charge that every time a CO is approved, that the deputies are going to be, funding is going to be allocated for the deputies to move forward, and then we have that lag time, that'd be a great idea, and I appreciate that.
We have to figure out what that math is. I had a question for you on this pole barn, because I think I heard you say at our other workshop that you're going to get rid of some of those helicopters. So I wondered, can't you put those in where those helicopters were, or is that a different kind of building?
Well, it's timing-wise. We can't get rid of the helicopters immediately because of FAA rules. FAA rules limit the amount you can use the drone, so we can't, by law, I wish we could, but the FAA, by law, we can't fly those drones. We have to have line of sight, and so there's parameters by the FAA, federal government, that we can't get rid of those helicopters right away. So we're going to have to keep those helicopters for a while longer until FAA rules allows us to use those drones in a better and efficient way. But we're going to get those vehicles, so for the next 2 years, I don't want those vehicles be, rained on, destroyed. Those are big investments, and so with taxpayer dollars, I don't, easy to put up a pole barn. I don't want to.
Right.
I would love to do that, but we just can't.
Sheriff, I have always supported Sheriff's Department, and I've always kind of chuckled a little bit about your number, 1.2 per thousand of population. I've always told you, I said, well, I think you do a better job with less. So, and the fact of it is, Pasco County is very safe because you and your department and what you do, and I believe that. But I also am along with my commissioners that we also need to help you to improve the numbers so we can better cover our citizens and protect them, because they deserve that. And protecting lives here for all our citizens is something we always need to do, and always up front, safety first. So I agree with taking care of, trying to do more as we can, but it's all about money. So we all know that. So.
And I agree 100%, sir. And I don't think anybody's board is for tax increases. I mean, the inflation, that number that you showed about inflation is absolutely true.
Yeah.
That's true for government, for us spending, that's true for every citizen we have.
Right.
It goes back to that repriority, and the other part too is that MSTU, and I know Commissioner Waitman has brought that up before in previous meetings, and I applaud the effort. And I agree 100% that an MSTU in the future is great. We just have to get our levels of funding to where, because if you come in right now and say, oh, we're doing MSTU for law enforcement, you're going to ask a huge tax increase on people. We need to figure out, get that number to a reasonable amount where Commissioner Starkey was saying that we have to have that number proportionally to Pinellas, and then say, okay, and pardon, I don't want to speak on behalf of our other fellow constitutional officers, but I'd be fine at that point to say, okay, every year, this is what I need, this is how much, and we go forward that way, where it's a clear, our citizens know, and that's the thing, the more apparent, the more clear we are to our citizens, they know who's asking for taxpayer dollars, the better off we're going to be. Burden should not be on the commission when our funding level hits a level that we know is good, and then at that point, I would say, okay, the sheriff's office comes in, this is what we need and why, because it's not fair to commission, because every year when we get our budget, we control our budget. Right. But I can explain at that point saying, okay, this is why I need more, but it can't be until we get a reasonable number, because if not, until we're in the ballpark of a Pinellas, we can't ask, because that number is going to be staggering. So apologize for that.
Yeah, we still got to be understanding of our citizens and the inflation. I'm in my 8th year, and the entire time, we've never raised any millage rate, except the fact that inflation has come in here and raised it every year on the values of the property here in our county. So that's the only way we've had extra money, has been through those values increasing. And it's tough, and it's tough for our citizens. And on the side of that, we have to look out, because of the fact insurance and other things have come a lot higher than they have been in the past. So our citizens are getting hit by a lot of different costs, and we need to be very aware of what's happening to them and pay attention, and also try to do the best we can to provide for our sheriff's department. Same thing.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Waitman.
Thank you, Sheriff, or Chairman. Sheriff, for your vehicle maintenance plan, we just recognized the county's fleet and the fantastic work they're doing, and they're on time and well under budget. Would it make sense for the county to take over your preventive maintenance schedule for your fleet, or is that something that you feel the sheriff's office should run? I'm just looking at synergies and way to, I know your cars are in use every day, it's your guys' offices, so.
Right. No, I appreciate it, sir. So, Commissioner, we had looked at this years ago about the efficiencies of the offices. I mean, everything. I looked at the number for the jail. I mean, I lived that for many years with healthcare costs. So we looked at different ways within the garage how we could be more efficient. This is the most efficient way we could be, and we actually look. And I'll tell you, I'm absolutely all for the fact of let's look to see how we can work together on projects. The 911 was a perfect example. When we gave up the 911 center to the county, it became more efficient. We looked at the efficiencies within the sheriff's office, how we do our vehicles. We're more efficient. We looked at the efficiencies. We believe that we're more efficient the way we do it internally ourselves, because our mechanics, they're not just working on the patrol vehicles. They're working on the high water vehicles. They're working on the response vehicles. They're working on so many different things, and we have them in different projects. It's not just working on that car. The other one, too, is with our fleet. The reason why they're just doing so many different things, with our fleet, once we have so many cars under warranty that, they're going out to warranty work. So it's not being done within. So we're constantly looking at what vehicles, especially of our detectives, their vehicles are always high warranty vehicles. So they're being taken care of at the dealerships. And then we get them to the auction so we can keep that high dollar, because we're trying not to take off the 40% money to get vehicles. We're trying to reduce it so we can almost try to get within the realm of penny for Pasco, but we'll never get there because we're growing. But long story short, I appreciate it, sir, but we actually looked at that a couple years ago, and there was no efficiency in our service. The way we operate 24/7 out there, storms, everything that we go through, it's better for us to keep that one in-house.
Okay. Thanks, Sheriff.
Thank you.
That was a good try, though. What about procurements? Because everything we do has to go out to bid, and I don't think that's the same for you. Do you want to work with us on getting bids on everything, or?
No, ma'am, it's much slower.
Well,
it's
that's
slower.
that's why we're making him hire a new
Here's the thing,
procurement
it's much
attorney.
slower. We do go out to bid. we go out to bid. We have a bidding process. We do go out to bid on projects. I mean, if you look at anything we purchase, you'll see the bidding process. You'll see why we do what we do. If it's sole source, it's sole source. But our process is much faster. And in the world we live in, the technology, you have to get things done. And so our process and the way we do things is more efficient. That's why other governments like, and I'll tell you, so Dade City, Zephyr Hills, and Newport Richey, they bounce on our contracts because we go through the FSA for most of our contracts. With the FSA, that's already bidded out, so we can get things done much more efficiently. So, no, I appreciate it. And here's the thing. If you look at the way the state of Florida set up constitutional offices, I understand why counties rely on constitutional offices sometimes to help procure projects, because we're able to get things done much more efficiently. And I promise you, look at anything we're purchasing, we're getting best dollar for it. And, you know, because of our partnerships with people, we're actually probably getting below value. I mean, yeah, below what cost should be, because we're getting above value. We're getting below what cost should be because of our efficiencies. But I feel bad for Mr. Carball and the team. I mean, it's much harder, the rules and regulations they have for procurement than we do, but we are it's much faster because the way the state statutes are set up.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. And Sheriff, thanks for all your input, your passion. You know, I think for several years, we're probably good for apartments in Wesley Chapel and Trinity right now to slow things down a little bit. You know, one of the things I think we've done with our fire MSTU is we're actually helping it be a better working condition for them as well. And we worked hard on trying to grow that up. And you've mentioned a couple of things, even with corrections, you made some changes, you want to make some changes. I hope you've incorporated that in your budget as well, because I think the pay is very important. And one thing great that with pay, at least the money stays right here. So if you can make it where your raises do go up, and that helps you get more people and maybe experienced people instead of train, I think it might help you with the transfer as well. Years ago, we did look at the MSTU, and that MSTU was going to go forward, except for one gentleman called in. I'd mentioned this story before. I'll just bring it up again. The problem with the MSTU, especially for this, is the burden is the 92% are going to take care of all of the cost, as opposed to sharing it if you just put it in the regular tax budget as we go forward. So keep that in mind, and some people don't like that, and that was why it didn't work last time. You know, we got to look at everything, right? We got to look at, like, mental health. You mentioned that. Premier, if they can help, if we can help with daycare, et cetera, it's all good to kind of cut down the calls. Just like it's great with the sheriff's office getting involved with sports, et cetera. And I know your kids alone keep you busy. Right. But the busier we keep our kids, the healthier people's mental health are, the less calls for you. Something else I want to work with you on, I've talked to staff about it, I've mentioned it before, but I know it's not a top priority, but the panhandlers out there, the homeless people out there, they cause a lot of damage still. And the fire we just had the second time in like 3 months over by US 19, that fire that just burnt out, we had like 10 trucks out there. We had like people everywhere. We had to make a call to let it burn or whatever, and it actually cost a lot of money. 10 grand, I think, was the minimum number as far as what that cost. So there's a cost involved with that. I'd love to work with you to have a special person with a deputy that we can actually put with our code to go forward, so that we don't take you guys from the call waiting that you got, but someone we can go count on, so when we've got a situation out there, we can go do it. Because I think the panhandling, or we'll call it a right-of-way safety ordinance in place that my attorney loves, his works real well, but it's got to be enforced. And our guys are afraid to do it because when you got homeless people with machetes, et cetera, they're in danger. We can't have them go out. We got camps that have gone out, and you did a phenomenal job a few years ago when that lady got robbed at Beacon Woods, and we went down to the post office, cleared that whole thing out. If you go down there now, you see a whole big bunch of trash out there. So they're still out there. We still got to work on that. But I'd love to work with you that and the other things you're looking to with your budget.
No, I appreciate it. Commissioner Mariano, I mean, you talked about before, and I'll bring this up publicly because it is an important, and it actually, I think, would be a successful idea that we talked about, is relocation back to their homes where they came from. Florida, Pasco County has had many people came down during the drug epidemic, prescription pills. They were coming down here to buy pills. I mean, a typical sad story is that boyfriend, girlfriend come down here, girlfriend gets pregnant, she's now living here with no support, he's dead in jail or runs away from her, and that becomes a Florida issue, that becomes a Pasco issue. These people, a lot of them, you know, the guys are out living in the woods, there's addiction issues. If they're from whatever state they're from, and we can just say, hey, look, we're going to get you back to where you came from, we're more successful because they have a church there, they have a family there, they have somebody there. And I don't think it's our burden that we would have to call people up and say, I just want to make sure you're going to take them at the train station. I want to make sure you're going to be at the bus station. It's like, no, sorry, hey, look, this is not working for you here. And the taxpayers in this community are having to consistently deal with, you know, all the crime, all the issues, the problems that come with it. So I like that idea about finding a way to get them back to where they came from, to the support networks that would make them succeed, because obviously them being here is not helping our community, it's not helping them. The one thing too is, I'm all for helping the women and children, especially those teenagers that they don't want to be homeless. They are just, they maybe just got thrown out of the apartment, they want to, and I know Metro Ministries does a phenomenal job. There's groups that do phenomenal jobs. But there's people in that woods that they don't want help.
Right.
They just want to be there. They don't care. You can give them everything in the world, and they don't want help. Well, you know what? It comes to a point that their trash that they're throwing out there, the needles that they're putting on the street, the quality of life that they're destroying for the good people in our community has to end. And at that point, it's like, hey, look, where are you from? We're going to send you back because obviously this is not working for you. You don't want our help. So in this community, we're going to make sure that you go back to where you came from because there's people there that love you, and they can take care of you.
Mr. Chairman? So Sheriff, I'd love to work with you on that. Let's go put a plan together on that specific issue right there, because when they did the point-in-time count years ago, I went to the Homeless Coalition. I said, look, let's go ask the question, where are you from? How'd you get here? And they did it one year. It was like 65% maybe was like from here, but the other 35 were somewhere else. Let's go find out where they're from. When we looked at the Navigation Center in San Francisco, the most successful part of their program, that was like 10 years ago, we looked at ours, was busing people back to where they came from. That was more effective than anything else they did. And we've been burdened by that. And we've been sent down from Carolina, New York, et cetera. They send us down at Pasco. Some of them even paid rent for a year, and then when they get done, now they have no more rent. Guess what? They're homeless.
Yeah.
So I would love to work with you on that.
Add on that.
So maybe we need 2 extra budget items coming. At least let's go look for that safety ordinance person, and maybe it combines with the bus money to get someone back to where they're from.
No, I appreciate that. That goes back to Assistant County Administrator Pearson's office because they're the ones that would spearhead that operation, and we would be able to funnel them to her office, and then she can send them off. So that'd be great because I know it falls under her and her unit, and so that'd be perfect that we would love to send her the names and then let them take them on and let them go to Greyhound or wherever they need to go back. So perfect. I
Ms.
appreciate
Starkey?
it.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. We, you know, because not everyone knows, our code officers are not allowed to carry. So it can be dangerous for them. So we'd love to have an assigned deputy working with them. Something that I just read was that the opioid deaths are going down. So maybe we peaked on that. So that's a good thing. But I'm very excited about the projects that we have coming with our opioid settlement money. And if you remember when we had that meeting with Tommy from Baycare, and you know, we talked about places where people could go right off the street, like a mental health emergency room. And I'm glad to say we have those coming. I don't know if you've been briefed on what the plan is with Baycare, but it was in the budget here, and we need to make sure he knows how we're investing that money. What else was I going to say? I have been hearing rumors, and I have some of my constituents who tell me that they've actually seen a neighboring law enforcement agency delivering people to our border and letting them out. But there was one in the paper that I called Kathy on where a social worker in another county said, go to Pasco. They have, you know, we can get you in a place in Pasco, and took one of our homeless beds, which we don't have enough. So I was pretty upset about it and said, no, you know, our people first. So we think, I agree with Jack, I think we have a lot of people that aren't from Pasco. But I am excited that we are going to have our first low barrier shelter, maybe 2, and more to come. But I'm excited for the future, that I think those numbers are going to come down.
So, no, I appreciate, Commissioner.
we-
And a couple things, I want to thank, we did a great job with JP Murphy and JJ Murphy. You have the Murphy brothers.
I know.
Great partnership working together. And so the one thing, too, is for Chief Perez, we discussed, talk about partnerships and working together. You've heard it before, and I'll say it again. Thank Mr. Carbala for spearheading and putting the right people in place, because our partnership with Fire Rescue, going back to you, Mr. Waitman, about how we can work better together, we've never had a better working relationship. We're working on drones together. We're doing so many different things together. The one thing is that with that opioid money, the first responders, firefighters, and law enforcement, what we're seeing out there and what we had seen and gone through, I mean, it's not normal for a human being to have to stick Narcan up somebody's nose to save their life. That's not normal. But that's what they live with, and that's what they do every day. If some of that money that could be used not only for people with addiction issue, but for our first responders and helping, because we have, we do wellness for our members, we do mental health, and if there's, I'm more than happy to partner with the Fire Rescue and use some of that money to go towards first responder mental health and things we can do, such as our chaplain program, family support network, things to support them. That would be phenomenal, because it doesn't just affect the addict, it affects the person that's running up to save their lives, too.
Yeah, very important. I think we got some programs coming that are going to be real good for taking care of those homeless and get them in the right place. So we've got them all over the county.
However, there is a Supreme Court decision coming. I listened to the arguments, first time I've ever listened to a Supreme Court case, that it's coming out of the 9th District Court of Appeals, which is the western states, that you cannot remove someone camping on public property. But the decision from the Supreme Court is going to affect all of us. So I am nervous about that, because now we're going to get lumped into that.
We still have some
so-
issues that deal with private property owners, and one we have over in Lacoochee, there's like 9 acres, and there was never any will, so there's no legality to someone to trespass to clean up an area that's got a lot of homeless people camping out on it. So, and some bad things are happening there. But we're working on that with some of the citizens, hoping to buy that property, and if they do that, then we'll change that scenario. So we're working toward that.
Mr. Chairman, just
Mr.
one
Mariano?
point to
Yeah.
Commissioner Starkey's point, as far as like people, and the sheriff's point about people coming from somewhere else. The
Yeah.
people that started the fire back in February off US 19
Mhm.
were from Hernando, trying to come down here, get services, and Kathy's team did a great job bringing them back up to Hernando where they should go for their services.
Right, that's good. So, but I think we have some things to cover yet, and we're under an hour of finishing up, so we need to move on to these. You need to cover these items we got showing, I guess, right now.
All right, Sheriff and Board, thank you so much for that rich dialogue and all of those fun action items. All right, so Supervisor of Elections.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'll be very brief. With a 9.4% reduction, I'm sure there's not a whole lot of discussion to be had. And I'd love to take full credit. My team and I, we are proud of being one of the lowest cost per voters in the state of Florida. As you know, our budget's cyclical. We live our lives in 2-year cycles. And so going into fiscal year 25, we don't have a major election, and a lot of the costs are in the current year leading up to November election. So pretty excited about that. I will just quickly say that reference to the county's general fund big picture, including our central count tabulators and precinct tabulators for the upcoming fiscal year, is beyond a necessity. The tabulators we're using, most of them are from 2008. That's 16 years. And so we're going to literally limp through this year, but a necessity going to the next cycle would be the replacement of those tabulators. So be happy to take any questions y'all have, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners.
Mr. Waitman?
Hey, thank you. Mr. Corley, you're baking in raises for your folks?
I'm sorry?
Baking in wages?
Yes.
What percentage?
I believe 5%.
All right, good. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
And Brian, greatly appreciate the great job you do, but would you please talk a bit about these tabulators, what they're going to do, how they're going to work, and well, obviously, election safety is critical, but if you would just kind of elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, elections have become part of the critical infrastructure. We have a seat at the table with nuclear power plants and whatnot, and as well it should be for what we do. I remember when I was appointed in 2007, at that time, we used the Ivotronics, the touchscreens. And I was still trying to figure out where the bathrooms were and the coffee pots, and the legislature changed voting systems. We went back to a paper ballot. At the time, it was controversial, but it was the best thing we ever did. So using a marked sense ballot, you can always recreate the election, which is for security reasons. You can't say enough good things about that. But these are basically optical scanners that are at each polling place, each precinct. And we've, like I said earlier, been using the majority of those since 2008, and they're beyond end of life. The aging technology is beyond aging. Literally, we had upgrades, and it can't take another upgrade of any firmware or software. It literally will stop working. And so that's why they're a necessity going forward. So.
Yes, Ms. Yeager.
So would these tabulators, would they be up and running for November?
No, Commissioner. We're going to use what we currently have.
Okay.
We're comfortable. We'll be okay. But this would be literally next fiscal year in advance of the 2026 cycle. We would have them procured, tested, staged, and all that stuff ready for the 26 cycle.
Okay, well, I'm all about secure elections, so it's important.
Mr. Waitman.
Thank you. To that point, Commissioner Yeager, on secure elections, I've had the pleasure of serving on canvassing board the last couple of years as a freshman. And I tell you what, Mr. Corley and his team and the judges that are in the room and the lawyers that are there, just a bang-up job, very efficient, very secure. All the tests are ran, very, very professional. Everybody is, takes the utmost seriousness in their job and makes sure Pasco County elections are valid. And so anyway, just want to say it on the record, enjoyed working with you folks the last couple of years.
Brian, you've done a great job over the years, and just keep up the good work, because, I think we all expect it, so.
Yep, we're
So-
perfect.
But we know you do a good job, and your people we really are grateful to have all the people that, even the volunteers, all that help us and help you through that election cycle, so it's very good.
Just one last thing.
Yes.
No pressure, but we love that Pasco is normally first to
Yes,
report.
yes. No, that is full pressure. That is pressure.
I know.
It is
Keep it up.
on game day.
Yes.
Sitting at the table.
That's right. Okay?
Thank you. All right, last but certainly not least, property appraiser. I know we talked a little bit, but go ahead, Brendan.
Yes, we did, Commissioners. Minimal changes year over year, and I highlighted some of the efficiencies earlier. One that bears pointing out, though, is that on slide 36, OMB has us at a 6.9% increase year over year. That was based on our original adoption of the budget last year. We did have a mid-year amendment, which narrows that gap to the 5.9 that I referenced earlier, and that was an important amendment in that it was for 2 new full-time positions to support the actions of this board with the senior exemption. So that will be coming online in January. Our additional homestead for income-qualified seniors age 65 or older. And we've got the folks in place now, ready to go to begin administering that and qualifying citizens as they come in. And really, that's everything.
Okay.
Chair.
Mr. Waitman?
Thanks, Brendan. So you're going to do 5% raises for your folks? Like the
So
other
we submitted
constitutionals,
we
or-
submitted a 6% to Department of Revenue, sir. We also forecast 5 and 6 at the request of OMB to give the option depending on.
So-
6%?
So yours encompasses another head, 2 heads? Not
Yes.
just wages, but and also 2
Yes, we have an
full-time
additional
head
full-time
count?
employee and additional
Okay.
commercial appraiser.
I got to object to 6%.
Noted, Commissioner, yes.
I have a hard time with 5%, but my board, 5% 4 years in a row, that's 20%. But
Well, when we look at that number, when we submit that, that's also reflective of pay studies comparable to other VAs around the region
I know,
and state.
everyone does that.
I know.
We they raise their price, and then, so then we got to match it, then we're higher, then they got to, but that's my own little thing on that.
Very important to be able to keep
But
employees.
I'll
and good
support 5, but
employees.
I got a hard time supporting 6, because I have
Yep.
a little hard time with 5, but that's me.
But it's understandable, because we have to match our competition, because we need to keep those good employees we've had here, and we've got a lot of good employees here in Pasco County.
I
Same
agree.
happens with Jeff and his group of attorneys. To keep good qualified attorneys and jobs that they know how to handle, we need to be able to step up and pay the price, so
I have a
Understandable.
question for the
All right,
property
question.
appraiser.
Yep.
And this is probably a question for the state, but if you can answer it, because I think it's a state issue. But when you said those values, that 15% is, did you say cost of,
Okay,
what's the
so
term?
Florida's level of assessment is 100% less reasonable cost of sale.
okay, so reasonable cost of sale. So I texted some of my friends who are the largest real estate company, commercial and real estate and residential in Tampa Bay area, and brokers. And I asked them what their cost of sale is, and they said the highest they've seen is 7%. So where does the state get 15%?
Well, the 15% is not a hard number, Commissioner. That's, when we said that, and Daniel mentioned it before too, that's where things had perhaps fallen historically, level of assessment below the recorded sale price. We have many parcels throughout the county now that are at 90%, 95%, 96%. In fact, the Department of Revenue had a time trend in recent years when the market was exceptionally hot, and we ended up in a spot where we were even in some cases, at 100% cost of sale, 101, 102. So that's not a hard and fast number. We've really gotten away from even sharing or verbalizing that as it was perhaps in years past. That was just a reference point that I was trying to give you, saying that there is a range versus cost of sale.
Because almost everyone I know says, well, I'll never sell my house for that price that you guys put on there. And so I just wonder if we have lost revenue because we're not appraising maybe where we could be, even if it was just a little bit higher.
It comes back really to the checks and balances that the Department of Revenue has in place for us as well. They do in-depth audits of our roll every year, and they have to fall within certain ranges as to where they should be based on comparable sales in the roll as a whole.
So if I remember right, and David's much smarter than me, and he's sitting right there, and you're going to see this when we have the presentation from the gentleman from Urban 3, that if you're not careful, then your really wealthy landowners are subsidizing your less wealthy landowners because of the disparity in this appraisal process. But am I saying that right, David?
Come forward.
We saw lots of examples
Come forward,
around the
David.
country, and it was tough to see.
David Engel, Planning and Economic Growth Director. Commissioner Starkey, you're correct. There is a disparity in lack of equity in the way land development impacts tax revenue. Some of the areas that were discussed were a lot of the build-to-rents and buy-to-rents should be potentially valued on an income approach because they are businesses receiving monthly revenue streams. And secondly, some of the, I think you got a little bit of reverse, some of the poor areas of the county have a disproportionment of responsibility than some of the wealthier areas because of the land use. So we're going to have a presentation very shortly, and we'll review those concepts, and I believe you've also invited Appraiser Wells to
Yes,
attend.
yes.
So it'll be very informative.
I was sending him slides from the presentation. The other question I have for you guys is on short-term rentals. And we're going to be having a workshop at the Tourism Council. But on short-term rentals, do you treat those as a regular house when you're appraising them, or do you treat them as a business?
That's a legislative.
Well, I'm just curious.
We're going to address the TDC, Commissioner, as far as the allowable component with a homestead exemption and things like that.
Well, they can't have a homestead exemption if they're a short-term rental, right?
Correct, inside of 30 days in a calendar year. If they exceed that, or we'll go over this at the TDC meeting.
So specifically to address the short-term rentals, what we're trying to do is still group properties, similar properties. So if you have a single-family home in a neighborhood, traditional neighborhood, they're going to be grouped as single-family homes. Our approach to value is going to be market approach. We're looking for sales comparables. Just because they're short-term rentals doesn't mean all of a sudden we can select that one and figure out what the income approach should be on that one. We're still grouping these properties. We're dealing with 300,000 parcels in the county to go and find individual short-term rentals.
Oh, we can supply you a list of every house that's operating as a
Not
business.
as easy as you may suspect.
Well,
But I understand.
well,
your con-
where's
I
Senator
understand your
Fasano?
approach.
Yeah, no, okay, I got a little problem with that.
At the end of the day, what matters is what these properties will sell for in the market.
I always look for equity and, you know, and if a hotel or motel is paying their price based on their business, and you got a house that's a business, and they're not paying taxes as business, that's not fair. That's not fair to the hotel industry,
I
in my
understand.
opinion.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Mr. Mariano?
I just want to congratulate Mike Wells for doing such a great hire with Brendan.
Oh, yeah.
Brendan and I worked together on a few different things, and I'll tell you what, his knowledge and delivery with, working
Well,
with
and this
people that
one,
may be
too.
excited, absolutely phenomenal. Keeps a calm demeanor every step of the way through, presents perfectly, and you're an asset to him, so appreciate you.
That's good.
Thank you.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and, you know, as we're going through this, Live Local is still an issue. There's a Live Local project that's in your district now, off Rowan. On
Another one?
Yep, on Office 1, isn't that right, David? They're coming, there's 2 office complexes on there now, and then there's a lot in front. It's right on Rowan, on the south end, on the west side of the road.
In your district?
I don't know, this is the
District
first I've heard
3.
of it.
But anyway, Brendan, a little bit of difference of opinion. I don't mind if the appraisers take ice paths from time to time during this market and through the appraisal process. So, but again, I appreciate all the work that you all do. I know it's tedious, and you guys do a great job.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Are you talking about Summer Lake Villas? Summer Lake?
Goldstein sent the parcel number.
And,
All right, Mr. Mariano?
You know, Brendan, a bit ago, we had our discussion about Live Local. It was a critical time where we adopted what we had to adopt. We sent a letter off to you guys where our attorneys felt very strongly that it was not justifiable to go Live Local for that 120% AMI. Have you guys made a decision? Are you still thinking about it, or?
We have not made a determination yet, sir. We are actively auditing the 2 applicants that we have and reviewing them with outside counsel, who is head of the Property Appraisers Association of Florida and has kind of undertaken the task of reviewing submissions from many counties to bring some analysis and uniformity to the process. But I can assure you that our team is qualifying this very stringently every step of the way.
Thank you.
Sorry, Brendan,
Ms. Starkey.
on that short-term rental thing, is that a statewide?
That's statute, Commissioner,
Yeah.
as far as a homestead exemption.
So
and, yeah,
I
the
just have to
duration
talk
of
to my
rental time.
legislators.
Yes.
Right.
Because I know that we can generate a list. Easy.
Amy, you have more for us?
I sure do. Board and our constitutional officers, I do want to thank you all for spending some time with us today, having this dialogue. The collaboration through this budget cycle has been really exciting to be a part of, so thank you guys for your time and all of this rich dialogue we've had. So now we're going to pivot back to looking internally under the board and the board's budget. And so last board meeting, the board adopted an ordinance for the MSTU. So in July, we will need to assign what I like to call a ceiling to those millage rates. So the local roads MSTU, that one, the next board meeting, they're going to come back with an update to their ordinance for the board to decide on. But we did need to just start the conversation around millage and the fact that we are looking to assign a millage in July. And again, I just want to remind the board from a process standpoint, the trim meeting in July assigns what I call the ceiling to the millage. So it's the point at which you can't go up, right? We can still come down in September when we get to the hearings. We just can't go up. And so we just wanted to have, just share with the board the staff recommendation in terms of revenue generated. So don't spend too much time looking at the specific millage rate, because when we get final assessed values in July, that number can fluctuate. Staff recommendation is towards the revenue that millage will generate. So our parks team is recommending 8.2 million annually in revenue, and then our roads team is looking at 24.8, with the understanding that 20 million of that would be for the paving program itself, and then the 4.8-ish million is overhead and associated costs. All right, so the capital plan, as proposed at this point, we're looking at $1.8 billion over a 5-year plan. So the board adopts the the next year budget, but we also adopt a 5-year plan. That plan is every year, we relook at it to adopt the numbers and the budget and the dollars for the next fiscal year, but we do adopt that plan. So some key notes and big ticket items in this 5-year budget. Our solid waste to energy expansion is underway, so you'll see solid waste, lots of money in that fiscal year 25 column, so they can be rounding out, paying for that waste to energy expansion. And then we've got some wastewater and water expansion projects going on with our water utility as well. And then we wanted to show just a 50,000-foot view of our very complex transportation engineering capital program. And so we've broken these up into some categories that we thought might make sense. So we've got capacity, think of new roads. We've got major maintenance, so maintaining the current roads that we have. Multimodal, so pedestrian, think trails, think sidewalks. Safety and intersections, and then signalization projects. All right, and then we have this slide here that we've labeled unfunded capital projects requiring future strategy. So we've been discussing and we've been hearing about some large projects that we haven't quite assigned funding sources to. And so part of this is just starting that dialogue to seriously strategize and consider how might we fund some of these large ticket capital items. The chief judge came in April and discussed the criminal courthouse. I'm sure you all remember that dialogue. We've got a public safety operations center, so we did get $3 million of legislative earmark for the design piece of the EOC portion of that, but we are having some dialogue and conversation around, does it make sense to co-locate other key operations in that same facility? So what does that look like? Roughly 53 million of that estimate is for the EOC piece, and then the rest is kind of fluid depending on what programs and operations do end up co-locating. Consolidated records, and then the sheriff's office, a fleet purchasing building, and adding some warehouse over in Land O'Lakes. All right, so budget calendar. This is a long process. You guys have been hanging out with me for a long time, and I really appreciate that. So just to remind everyone, February, we talked revenues and looked at our economic outlook. In March and May, we met with you individually, and we started having our budget meetings internally where we did what I like to call budget scrubbing. Everyone in the audience knows what that looks like. June, we're here hanging out with you guys. Our friends at the property appraiser's office also came and did some education with us. Thank you, really, truly did appreciate the time that you've spent today. July is trim, and September are our hearings. We're getting there.
Yep.
All right, anything we haven't talked about that you all would like to talk about? And it's okay if that answer is no, because we've talked about a lot.
We have talked about a lot, but appreciate all staff, what they've done for us and what they brought to us here with this budget, because it's been very informative. I think y'all have received also from us today during our discussions direction of where we would tend to want to go, and some of that deals with the sheriff and other departments. So I think that we have to work on and get to where we need to be. So, any board member wants to say anything?
I have a question.
Okay.
What exactly, when we went from 10 to 12.8, what did that get us with the sheriff's budget?
Oh, roughly 4 million more.
Yeah, no, but what did the 4 million get us?
I think his 9% he asked for came to like.
I was trying to find that paper and I can't find it.
14 million something dollars, but in that 40% share, I believe he got 17 million, is that right?
Yes, sir, that's about that rough math, which equates to approximately 4 million additional recurring dollars that would flow into his budget. Correct.
Right.
But what how will that get spent? Can we direct it to deputies,
What I've
or
heard the
what?
board, I've heard direction from the board here is to sit down and perhaps work with the sheriff towards a targeted goal of a specific ratio over time. I think those, I'm not going to tell the sheriff how to spend his money, but those dollars may come into play with that. But we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about his current law enforcement levels and, versus population, and chart out a plan that can hopefully get us where he needs to be. If not, then we will come back to this body and show you the facts and see what it is that we can do. But I think that should play into it, of course.
Yeah, that sounds good.
What we didn't ask him was, so we've been giving this extra 10, and I remember a couple years ago, we even gave money for even more than 10, I thought. But, so those deputies should be coming out of the training. So it'd be good to see a projection of where we were 5 years ago. When did we start adding the extra money for the extra 10?
That was at the point when you took over the jail and we had to reallocate the percentages. It used to be 50% of new revenue, and then when the county assumed control of the corrections department, there was about a 10% reduction. We took that money out of his budget for what we knew at the time, and then part of it was to add back 10 additional deputies. That was to ensure that the board was making sure they were getting deputies. Typically, he has said in his budget that he has matched that at 10. So typically.
But I think there was a year that we threw some extra money, knowing we're.
That would have predated
before
me in this
the
role, I
jail.
don't know.
When, was it when they got, when the grant,
I don't remember, but it was before the jail happened. We just tried to bump him up.
I think
Do you remember that, Jack?
It was
Remember?
after the step increases were done.
Yeah.
'Cause there was a time where the salaries were, he was doing a step increase.
We did a 3-year
and
step
then when
increase.
that was done, I think the board then added deputies.
We did
to
a
that.
bump for
I know-
money for
I don't know if
deputies.
it was last year or 2 years ago that we added 10 deputies.
Yeah, but this is
and
before
then-
That
that.
was in 2022. That's when you
Yeah.
started that.
And then he also added 10 deputies that year. I
Yes,
believe.
sir.
Well, it should be 20 every year for the last
Or at
couple
least for the
years.
last, for 22, 23, and,
But if you could look back to, and I don't know how you guys do that, but there was a year, well, I would see when the 3-year step stopped and then look at the budget after that. And then let's just see, I'd love to see, are we going down? Are we staying flat? Are we going up compared to COs? And then I think we have to get a plan once we see those numbers.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Brown,
On a regular budget with the 2 MSTUs coming up as well, I think we should have, I don't know if there's any way to get more detail to what Parks is going to do with the money as well, how it's going to work out, or is it just an offset of the budget? And one thing I just heard as far as the revenue generated of 24.8 million, Amy, you mentioned 4.8 was going to be for overhead. What kind of overhead would that be?
So that's actually hiring, and if Branford's team here, if I'm missing anything, but they'll need to hire a significant number of inspectors in order to ensure that the quality control of the work is. So there's some one-time costs that are coming in as we staff up. Historically, we haven't done that level of paving before. So Branford, you or Public Works?
Morning, Justin Grant, Director of Public Infrastructure, Fiscal, and Business Administration. That builds in the assessment costs as well as the statutory discount that's provided for 321, depending on when they pay their costs. We also have some money built in there for sidewalk maintenance.
All right, now how do we do as far as figuring out the issues we had when we were last talking about it? Mickey, you said you thought we were getting close to a solution yesterday.
I would prefer we present that at the next board meeting after we've made sure everything is.
But as Justin just said, part of that solution is in the 4.8 million.
That is correct.
Okay.
Question.
That's helpful.
He snuck it in as assessment, but that's what he was saying.
They're gonna work it out.
Ms. Starkey.
So I hear you saying sidewalks, and we have trails, multi-use paths, and sidewalks. For example, the multi-use path on Starkey Boulevard needs a little resurfacing. Is that part of your, but whose budget is that in?
So currently, no. I know we've got our transportation engineering team that goes in the complex, Amy, you talked about our very complex transportation program, and part of that deals with multi-use paths. The sidewalks we're talking about is more so directed towards the local road program that is now expanded to arterial collectors and local roads. So we want to try and address those sidewalks as we go through that the county hasn't historically touched at all.
But if I understand the commissioner's question, you're looking at these larger multi-use paths, who's responsible for resurfacing and
Yeah,
maintenance of those?
you got to start building that in a budget, because
I understand, yeah.
I think Starkey Boulevard Trail is one of the oldest ones, and it's needing some attention.
Yeah, I don't have a direct answer for you, but I'll get back to you on that. I understand what you're looking for.
Yeah. We can highlight how much the transportation program funds towards that.
And I assume the Suncoast Trail, I don't know whose responsibility is that one, and when was the last time that was resurfaced? And if you drive along the Suncoast, you see all that wood is falling apart and looks pretty bad. Keith's coming up, I think.
Yeah, I think that goes to Parks.
Yeah, so to differentiate who's got responsibility, Keith, why don't you spell that out here? Because I know we've talked about it.
Keith Wiley, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Natural Resources. Spell out the difference or the...
Who's responsible for which kind of multi-use trail?
That question is constantly being asked, yes. So the unwritten policy is that if it's within the right-of-way of Public Works, if it's not within the right-of-way, we were calling those like linear park facilities, and they would fall ultimately after construction to the Parks Department.
Okay, just want to make sure that's being built into budgets, because they will need upkeep.
Well, and I think these maintenance MSTUs will go a long way to ensuring we have funds to maintain infrastructure that we've put into place.
Okay, so if I heard right, then if it's in the right-of-way of a road, then is it not with this MSTU that we're about to? Why would we only do one half the road and leave the other one to someone else? Sorry, come on back up. Because now I'm hearing 3 different departments, maybe, if that's what I'm hearing.
So actually, I'll defer to Jason on the location of that, but I can tell you in the MSTU, the location, if I understand what you're talking about, is not intended to be included in the MSTU, so I'll defer over to Jason.
He gives me the hard question. Good morning, almost afternoon, Jason Mickle, Public Works Director. If Public Works takes care of stuff, we maintain things. So if we're getting things to us, we're accepting them into our maintenance, we will take care of them, and we will have to factor that into our budget long-term.
So the multi-use trail along a road that you maintain will be yours? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I mean, moving forward, someone's got to take care of it, right?
I know someone, I'm just trying to find out whose budget that's in, and are you paying attention?
Mr. Chairman, if I can, legally, those facilities which we constructed, we have to maintain. The debate over the years has been the local road sidewalks which we did not build, that were developer constructed, that we didn't maintain. And that's what I think that what's being said is that's what the MSTU is designed to start to pick up, is those facilities that have gone unmaintained all these years.
But somewhere else in another part of your budget, you have in the back of your mind that you have to factor in maintenance of the multi-use trails.
He has to maintain them right now if they're in
Yeah.
his right-of-way and we constructed them.
Okay, just making sure, because
Pretty
I know
easy.
there was this little question, as Keith said, it was unwritten.
Yeah,
We're
we're
bringing it out
trying
into
to
the sunshine.
unwind a lot of past deals here, and
Okay.
so making this less complicated and more straightforward is part of that. So we're working through that in real time.
Thanks so much, great job.
All right, thank you. Is that pretty well covered?
Yeah.
All right. Amy, thank you and your staff for your presentations today and all the work you've gone through. Mr. Kabala, thank you and your staff and team for bringing this all together and made it a very good budget workshop. We did save you a little bit of time. We didn't have to put tables out here and all that. So I think that worked out pretty well and move things a little bit smoother when we're meeting here on these kind of budgets. But thank all of you for all the efforts you put into making this happen, and we look forward to the next meeting where we can continue. Okay?
Sounds good, thank you. And
Thank
thank
you.
you to everyone who was here to answer all of the questions that I could not. Appreciate each and every one of you.
Yep. We're adjourned.